He's been reincarnated as an ant. A pathetic, tiny little worker ant, freshly hatched and barely able to dig through the dirt. Meanwhile, the surrounding monsters are massive and famished, waiting to eat him alive right from the jump. Now he has no choice but to haul ass, hoping to get swolled up enough to deal with them later. Just a moment ago, he was still human, and this is the story of how he turned into an ant. When this guy wakes up, he tries to figure out what the hell is going on and where he is. Turns out he just kicked the bucket. The last thing Anthony remembers is chilling and reading a book in his cozy home, but now he's stuck in this infinite white void. If this is heaven, where's the swimming pool and the all-you-can-eat buffet at? Then he gets another system notification saying he'll soon awaken to experience life once more in a new world. The guide will be none other than Gandalf himself. He says Anthony will be reborn in a magical world of Pangera, where destiny and luck will decide his fate. He'll start with some base stats that look pretty solid on paper. Anthony even hopes he might be as cracked as a main character in his favorite game. But the detailed summary lists his skills as digging, acid shot, grip, and bite. And even more shocking, the species ID lists him as a newly hatched worker ant. Anthony can't believe he's about to be reincarnated as an ant. If his mana is 0, he can kiss his dreams of becoming a mage goodbye. Gandalf owes him an explanation, and this skill list is straight up trippy. There's a bite skill, and then a weird acid shot skill. Where are all the OP main character skills? The most alarming thing is he's listed as a newly hatched worker ant, a Formica. Not only is he an ant, but a newly hatched worker at that. Maybe Anthony dirty maxed someone in his past life, so the Gandalf system is punishing him. But that's impossible. He was basically a loner with no connections in the past. Looking at his empty bookface inbox and his severe introversion, it hits him hard that he had 0 homies or meaningful relationships. Gandalf urges him to move forward and forge his own path. Maybe it'll be the path of an ant. If that's the case, Gandalf can go forge his own mama. Completely unprepared for what's coming, the cranky voice starts the countdown to initiate the soul transition. 3, 2, 1. It feels like everything blacks out when the count ends. The soul transition is complete, and with it, the incubation process kicks off. Anthony is shoved into a weirdly uncomfortable position. His body feels bizarre, like he's being squeezed from all sides while he's shaking like a leaf. He didn't fully buy those text boxes earlier, but he really is being reborn as an ant. This is actually happening. Checking his new weak body, he feels 6 legs. That's 1 check for the ant body checklist. 2 antennae are present, and his sturdy mandibles are fully functional. Counting from head to tail, he counts 3 distinct body parts. He used to keep ants as pets, and now he's turned into one. It sounds like a freakish nightmare scenario. Not to mention the crappy lighting. Where he's standing is darker than a pitch-black night. Everything is total darkness, and on top of that, his vision is blurry as hell. But after walking a bit, Anthony starts to see some blurry things, and behind the light at the end of the tunnel, there's something blue. Luckily, he can still see colors. Other than that, he wonders what else he can do. Maybe it's time to make the most of this new ant body. Feeling the environment with his antennae feels weird, but he can sense unknown smells and the airflow ahead. The most prominent scent is musty, proving he's definitely underground. But if he's an ant, shouldn't he smell pheromones? He can't sense any pheromones, so where are his brothers and the whole colony? Anthony was given a second shot at life, and he doesn't want this life to be lonely again. After walking a few more minutes, he starts picking up a scent similar to his own. Maybe a new squad is waiting on the other side of the tunnel. He just needs to follow that flashing blue light and hope nothing bad happens when he reunites with his ant brothers. The closer he gets to the exit, the more the hype builds. He excitedly rushes over to meet his ant brother, determined to carry out any mission for the glory of the colony. But when he reaches the end of the tunnel, things aren't what he expected. His new teammate looks like he's in deep trouble, getting tossed up into the air. On the other side is a hideous monster grinning, revealing sharp teeth and lean muscle hidden under rough scales. It's a nightmare for a tiny guy like Anthony the Ant when his potential teammate has been neutralized. The reptile monster casually feasts on its prey, munching away with satisfaction. It doesn't even eat the ant in one bite. It tears the poor guy's body into pieces first. Anthony starts to freak out. He's just a guy who likes ants and books. He didn't sign up for this smoke. No matter how much he wants to opt out, this is actually happening. This is his reality now. Ants being devoured and crushed by monsters. That ant stuck under the monster's foot looks at him with pleading eyes, and it's a total wake-up call. What can a lone ant even do in this situation? Only one thing comes to Anthony's mind. That was his only move, to haul ass as fast as possible on his 6 newborn legs, running for dear life, because his survival depended on it, even though it was his first time running in this new body. He was incredibly clumsy. He even did a faceplant after running for a long while. He must have escaped that monster's turf by now. But what if another one casually strolls through this tunnel and treats him like a snack? The only way to survive is to ditch human rules and think like an ant. As if by instinct, he knew exactly what to do. Dig, dig, dig. Going hard at it was one thing, but actually pulling it off was another. His legs weren't doing squat. He was just scratching the surface. That's when Anthony flashed back to when he watched his pets. Ants use their mandibles to dig, so basically, he needed to use his face to excavate. Without wasting another second, he immediately sank his trusty mandibles into the rough surface and started munching on the dirt. Now, this is what you call digging. Digging with his face for a few seconds was more effective than using his legs for several minutes. After reaching a decent depth, he carved out a spherical space with enough room to move around, and with his new base established. Anthony the ant could finally kick back and rest after a hard day's work. He was safe for now, but if other creatures sniff him out, it would be a death sentence. How the hell did he end up here anyway? It hasn't even been a full day, and he's already squared up with a terrifying monster. Newborn ants are supposed to be born in a protected colony, surrounded by their own kind. Looking at the fate of that poor ant brother back in those reptiles' territory, things are looking pretty cooked. He might not be the only one tossed into this desperate situation, which means a raid is popping off. With a little more time to think, Anthony remembered what Gandalf, the system, said about skill points and biomass. The world Anthony lives in now is a total mystery. The arrival of the system brought massive perks to civilization, but they can't even remember what they lost. Back to Anthony's dilemma. He currently has 1 skill point and 1 biomass point to blow. He has to make them count. If this is like a game, there's got to be some kind of menu screen for him to access. At first, he tried lifting a leg and yelling level up into the void. Not only did it do nothing, but he also looked like a total clown. Another idea popped into his head. Maybe this way will work. He decisively swiped at the empty space in front of him and shouted as loud as he could. Open status board. And it worked. An incredibly exciting text notification appeared right before his eyes. He still didn't know if his stats were high or low, but at least he could check them out whenever now. In the skills tab, he saw grip. It probably means he'll be able to hang on to things pretty well. In the description, it said grip is the ability to cling to surfaces and objects without slipping. One example of its use is the ability to walk on walls. Anthony's eyes lit up with joy after reading that. This could be the merciful and glorious comeback of Lord Gandalf, the system, his lord and savior. He might just be a text box, but he definitely has the most magnificent beard and eyebrows in the world. Since there's no better name for this praiseworthy, blessed voice, Gandalf will stay Gandalf for now. And Anthony will praise that name because he's been granted the most precious gift, the ability to access vital intel with just a thought. Looking at the skill list, he knew that locking in the right choice was survival critical. Should he pick Acid Shot? Maybe buffing his digging ability would be more clutch. Gandalf is great and all, but Anthony has to find out for himself what his skills can actually do. As far as he knows, many ants on Earth can spray formic acid from their rear, so he must be one of those monster ants that can spit acid. It opens up an attack option without getting too close to the target. That's a move that could help avoid getting insta-killed in a fight. A long-range attack would be super handy. But considering the current situation, biting, crawling, digging, and shooting acid aren't really the best tools to focus on right now. What Anthony is starving for is information. He still doesn't know where the hell he is or what other creatures live here besides ants and those crocobeasts. He's pretty sure he doesn't have vocal cords, so he can only rely on himself to gather intel in these tunnels. Going out there solo with countless freakish horrors that could cause unspeakable damage is straight up crazy. Just thinking about the things that could kill an ant on the surface makes him shiver. Anthony had to try and lock in, so he wouldn't go into a full-blown panic. He had to stay rational and chill to survive. After gassing himself up, Anthony went full focus. From now on, he only has himself to lean on. He's got his basic skills down. Now he just needs to spend those skill points. But that's the million-dollar question. How does he do it? The answer came as soon as he thought it. Gandalf himself sent a notification for him to spend skill points. He couldn't help but stand this wise and magnificent invisible system voice. He wished that the beard of Gandalf, the bringer of hope and light, would stay fluffy forever. There were so many options it was hard to pin down the meta. He needed to handle this logically. The ability to run faster would definitely help him dip from enemies when things get hairy. Sensing the tunnels would also help him navigate the underground terrain more easily. Bite and Acid are purely offensive moves to help him fight more effectively when needed. As for body upgrades viable with biomass, he could choose the exoskeleton, mandibles, legs, eyes, antennae, and acid gland. It's no cap to say that out of all the residents in this area, he's currently the weakest link. So he decided to buff his vision with 1 biomass point and used 1 skill point for stealth to boost his hiding ability and move around without getting spotted. As soon as he confirmed, his eyes started burning like fire, as if a literal flame was ignited in his corneas. The sudden sharp pain hit him, making him feel like he'd been backstabbed by Gandalf himself. Anthony rolled around on the floor, trying to distract himself from the burning sting in his eyes. But once everything settled down, he admitted that the body upgrade was faster than he thought. If he still had a human body, this process would have definitely taken forever. Now that you have effective countermeasures for what this territory throws at you, with newfound confidence, you crawl out of the tunnel. Because it's time for some scouting. Your vision feels much clearer. No strange smells or vibrations can be detected from afar. Before you is a choice between two paths. The right one is where that beast devoured the other ants, so that's a dead end. Only one choice left. Go left and face whatever this path has in store for you. The panicked ant from before is gone. Anthony, the confident explorer, has taken over. He scurries as fast as possible, and his speed is no joke at all. Anthony chuckles to himself as his adventure is going smoothly without any hiccups. Logically, hanging upside down should help his stealth and grip skills. Now he just needs to put his new eyes to use. Compared to before, he can see a bit clearer now. He even spots mysterious blue veins twisting and branching within the rock. With improved sight, he can also see exactly what's happening to his body. Over time, the soft white exoskeleton of a newborn ant is hardening. Keep crawling. Finally, he reaches the end of the tunnel and is greeted by a blinding flash of light. It radiates from the blue veins and a pool in a massive reservoir cave, but the monsters loitering around there are just as huge. He was so focused on the pool that he almost missed the terrifying beasts lurking nearby. Assuming he's currently the weakest link, he's basically dead meat if spotted. Sneaking won't just be vital for survival, but for efficient intel gathering. As for vision, everyone knows how much life sucks with bad eyes. Anthony was so used to human vision that switching to pathetic ant eyes left him disoriented. If something doesn't move, he can barely see it. Must remember that ants are social creatures. Thousands to millions of weak individuals combine to create power. A lone ant has trash senses, and they make up for it with unity. That's exactly why his situation is so tragic. He's all alone and has to survive while potentially tripping over a sleeping dragon with these crappy eyes. So, he's determined to prioritize buffing his eyes and won't stop until he can spot a cockroach twitching through 5 meters of solid rock. After a while, Anthony developed a new red exoskeleton. As he observed the cliff above the pool, he started hearing terrifying sounds closing in on the walls. He knew he needed to take a closer look. After a few minutes of gripping and racing to the top, he was close to the source of the noise. Scanning the ground with his improved eyes, he still couldn't pinpoint the exact location. He can barely focus when those weird blue letters keep wiggling in front of him, blocking his field of view. Watching the water dripping from the ceiling, he finally found the source of the puddle, but that couldn't be where. Those eerie sounds he kept hearing were coming from. Anthony really needs to lock in because there's definitely something else he hasn't seen yet. The signs are right there, but he just hasn't connected the dots. Obviously, it's the monsters making all that racket. From a safe spot on the ceiling, he observes a wolf beast snarling below. Noticing that dogs gaze glancing toward him, he immediately ducks behind a protruding rock. That was a close call. Maybe it's time to test out his new ability. Anthony finally unleashes his brand new stealth skill. His red exoskeleton immediately becomes transparent, cold as ice. Now that he's not worried about being exposed, he can safely observe what's so special about this puddle. He got a clear look at that hideous wolf lizard beast that almost spotted him earlier. The next target to note is none other than his arch-nemesis, the one who slaughtered his ant-kin. The home wrecker and baby snatcher, the wicked Kroga beast. No matter how he looks at this monster lineup, Anthony can't help but feel something is sus. None of these dangerous creatures are attacking each other. It's like they silently signed a round-table treaty or something. Anthony doesn't rule out the possibility he missed a great Monster Peace Summit or whatever. He knows he won't get a straight answer just by sitting still. Maybe moving closer to the action will help. But he has to keep reminding himself that slow and steady wins the race. Given his size, crawling down from the ceiling takes several minutes. If ants could sweat, he'd be dripping enough to fill a second pool in this secret cave. But his workout wasn't for nothing. Moving while stealth was active helped the skill rank up to level 2. He has covered a significant distance to get down to where it's all going down. His initial hunch about skills was right. If used constantly, they could be grinded to higher levels. Hiding and observing basically lets him kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He can actively gather valuable intel while training his stealth skill. Even though his confidence is puffing up like a balloon, he has to pop it and stay woke. Getting too cocky is a recipe for disaster. If he gets caught, he's instant lunch meat. Calming down, he gets close enough to see the next group of monsters loitering around the puddle. There are several beasts tangled in a clump, so it's hard to see what they actually are. As he got closer, he was greeted by bloodshot eyes, blue pincers, and legs, hundreds and hundreds of legs. Anthony saw the hideous bodies of those centipedes and couldn't help but want to gag. Screw this damn dungeon for showing him something so nasty. Some sedatives would be clutch right about now. As for the last resident of this cursed place, the lizard monster didn't look too bad, but he had to watch out for those annoying sharp spikes. He might be the weak link for now. But Anthony saw a chance to turn all these scary creatures into a potential biomass harvest. All the points in the world were waiting for him. But to pull that off, he needed to prep, and prep hard. For the next few hours, he diligently camped above the waterhole, while slowly shifting positions to avoid being spotted by the locals. He carefully watched the creatures' movement patterns, taking note of where they went after leaving the water. In the first hour, the first pair to leave were the Z-Beasts and the Kroga Beast. Strangely, they headed for the same exit. By the second hour, the next to take a break were the Wolf Lizards. They went straight to a small tunnel in the south. In the third hour of scouting, the last to leave the pond was the Spiny Lizard. It crawled up the wall and vanished. Looks like we got another wall crawler, just like Anthony. He'd call that reptile bro if he didn't have to hunt and eat it. That intense spying session bumped his stealth skill to level 3. In this place, patience pays off, and it came at the perfect time because his poor ant claws desperately needed a break. After reaching the exit point, his sweet home was finally just one more dig away. Anthony wished he could just chill, but he didn't have that luxury. There was still a ton of work to do. First, he desperately needed to expand the breathing room in his base. Doesn't it take some digging? Using his powerful mandibles, he started munching on the dirt with pure hype. He diligently gathered dirt by instinct while reinforcing his crib. As soon as he hit tunneling level 2, a notification popped up congratulating him on settling down. Finally, after digging like a madman, he could take a breather. He felt a familiar sensation, like when his family stopped sending money and forgot to stock the fridge. He was starting to get hangry, and he knew this feeling all too well. As his stomach growled, he convinced himself he had to wait. Once he woke up, he could go hunt his first prey. Anyway, he already had his eyes on that spiky target. The next day came fast, and Anthony was currently hanging from the cave ceiling, his claws gripped tight to the cold rock with a single thought looping in his head. He was so hungry, he was practically drooling at the monsters below. But hunger brings weakness and the shakes. He was starting to run on fumes. His mind was flooded with chocolate, bread, pastries, and steak. All the delicacies he used to eat in his past life were swirling in his head. The hunger had gotten so bad his mind started playing tricks on him. The last time he saw a Kroga Beast, he could have sworn it looked exactly like a slab of meat, and he almost jumped down from the ceiling to take a bite. Even the hideous centipedes were starting to look more like a delicious plate of noodles served on a golden platter. Anthony needed to fix this hunger issue before he played himself by biting something he shouldn't. He'd been prepping his next move for too long. He couldn't let his stomach stall the grind. 2 days, 2 whole days of elaborate prep. He had studied every nook and cranny of this cave area in microscopic detail. 2 days with almost no sleep plus hunger made it hard to stay locked in. He'd been hanging over the puddle so long he almost nodded off and fell in the water several times while staring at that mysterious pond. He knew if he fell in, that swim wouldn't be a vibe at all. A nice side effect of pushing his limits while spying and keeping stealth active 24/7 was that the skill hit level 4. Thanks to spending his free time digging and expanding his hideout, his tunneling skill climbed to level 3. That was just Anthony's style. He preps and he scales. That's how the underdog takes down the heavy hitters. However, hunger is a tough enemy to handle. He could only hope to successfully conquer his first prey soon. When his antennae twitched, he sensed the target approaching. He could already smell the stench wafting off the beast. When Anthony saw the light reflecting off those reptile eyes inside a stone hall, he knew it was showtime. The prey he chose always used the cave walls as a resting spot, crawling down to drink from the pond once a day. Basically, it was a loner with predictable movement patterns, a creature that could be taken down. After a few minutes, the spiny lizard finally crawled out of its den for its usual drink. It was time to test if Anthony's prep would actually yield a W. Activating stealth, he moved quietly along the wall, trying to keep pace with his reptilian prey. He reassured his stomach that it wouldn't have to wait long. Just getting into the right position to strike would make the mission a total success. Looking closely at the lizard's spikes, he knew getting poked once meant it was game over. But now wasn't the time to be scared. Fear is the mind killer, and his stomach was counting on him. He had prepped so hard he couldn't let anything distract him. The timing of the pounce would decide everything. The moment he reached the planned spot, Anthony didn't waste a second to attack. Stealth gave him the opening to spray an acid shot from above, splashing directly onto one of the lizard's legs. Anthony was low-key celebrating inside because Phase 1 was a success. As he broke stealth, the lizard was hissing in agony with its leg melted down to the bone. When the prey finally saw the one who caused its pain, Phase 2 officially started. He taunted the lizard, asking if it really wanted to catch hands on the wall, a move that was basically a death wish. Anyway, Anthony's cracked grip skill reached level 3 after all that stalking. Neither the wall nor the lizard were a challenge for him anymore. Plus, he had the natural advantage of being agile and light. While that beast was heavy and clunky, with its feet burning from acid, managing the wall was mission impossible. But the simple-minded beast was blinded by rage, using its powerful tail to try and swat Anthony off. With a high-damage tail whip, the cave wall was trashed while Anthony hopped off his vantage point to stay safe. Everything was going exactly according to plan, and at this point, he was basically just playing with his food. His next acid shot was aimed straight at the lizard's face. Another melting wound, another scene of it writhing in pain on the ground. Quickly jumping across the cave walls, Anthony repositioned to a safer and more advantageous spot. The lizard's pained roars echoed throughout the waterhole. That was the signal for Anthony to wrap it up quickly. He couldn't let other monsters third-party the battle he'd worked so hard to set up. Exhausted from the corrosive wounds, the lizard started to slow down. It was time to send it packing. But before running out of steam, the lizard still managed to throw one last tail whip. This swing was outside Anthony's calculations. The sudden lunge and tail whip caught him off guard. Luckily, he was far enough away to have a split second to react and panic dodge. As the lizard's last bit of strength went into that failed attack, the chance for Anthony to finish it once and for all had arrived. He leaped from the cave ceiling with his mandibles ready to clamp down and secure the kill. A loud crack rang out near the pond. Anthony didn't dare let go of the prey's rough skin because now was time for the final phase. The endgame was simple. A battle of endurance as he kept the bite pressure on the beast until they both free-felled off the wall, positioning the lizard beneath him so the beast would tank the fall damage while he never let go. When the lizard finally stopped moving and resisting, he low-key apologized because these are the rules of this world, and food is food. Anthony started spraying acid all over the lizard's body to pierce through its tough hide in the process. The acid shot skill also hit level 2. Man, leveling up is fast. Checking the prey, he noticed the poor thing wasn't quite dead yet. Looks like they'd have to pull off the next step in a brutal way. For both the prey and the predator, meaning Anthony had to ruthlessly feast. On the dying lizard's rock-hard body, blood and guts stained the ground as creepy munching sounds filled the room. A moment later, his bite skill climbed to level 3. It took him a solid 10 minutes to do it, but the gruesome job was finally finished. Restored by the meal, Anthony felt like a daredevil fresh off the hunt. He felt like a knight coming out of his latest life-or-death battle. Like I came, I saw, I conquered. He literally devoured his enemy after the W. Thinking back, he realized he'd never put in this much effort for anything. No, in his past life, he never pushed himself to try for anything. Looking back at how he lived, he only remembered feeling numb throughout that whole time. But now he had defeated a level 2 Spinetta Lizardos and hit level 2 himself thanks to the XP. An extra skill point was granted. Gandalf is suddenly yapping a lot with all these notifications. So this lizard is a Spinetta Lizardos. The name sounds low-key like Latin. This wasn't his first time seeing Latin characters. His own species was labeled as Formica. Recalling his hobby of keeping ants, Formica must be the Latin name for wood ants. If every creature in this world has a Latin name, his book smarts will definitely come in handy. Besides that discovery, he learned 3 very important things about his situation. First, he can gain experience to level up after defeating other creatures. Second, he can earn a precious skill point to allocate every time he levels up. And third, since this Spinetta was a level 2 monster, he could make 2 more guesses. The lizard was either born at level 2 or it had leveled up once. More importantly, he couldn't forget his purpose for being here, taking the prey's body to buff himself. As a hunter, a predator, he must eat and get swole, devouring the flesh of the strong and the weak. Anthony was grateful for this meal, don't get him wrong, but the lizard meat tasted straight up trash. It was so nasty it almost triggered another gag reflex. But now that he'd consumed meat from a new biomass source, he was rewarded with a point. Gandalf has been yapping in his ear all day today. Lying down in his cave, the stomach growls were replaced by loud burps. At least he doesn't have to worry about food for the next week. Besides the satisfaction of a full stomach, he had another harvest from Gandalf. Now it was time to retreat to the nest and plot his next move. Reaching the top of the cave, Anthony looked down at the beasts below. They were completely mesmerized by the pond water, not even knowing one of their neighbors was missing. After a few minutes of running around, Anthony finally made it back to his humble nest, rubbing his hands together like a movie villain because it was time to cook up another plan. First, a quick check of the status board, updated after the hunt. His stats were mostly the same, but his skills had evolved big time. He couldn't help but feel like a lone ant embarking on a thrilling adventure and experiencing insane growth. Even facing the cruelty of fate and every plot twist, he'll still push through despite the odds. He's going to survive no matter how bad the situation looks. But that's enough daydreaming for one day. You need to come down from Cloud 9 and get back to reality. Shaking his head, Anthony locked in on the present. Right now, he needs to make another clutch decision, and it requires some serious caution. He only has 2 biomass points to spend, so he has to weigh every option carefully. His eyes were glued to one spot, his eye mutation. He wanted to evolve his eyes to +2 for the love of holy light. When Gandalf's voice rang out asking if he wanted to drop 2 biomass points for the next level, Anthony confirmed without a second thought. He could never truly get used to that sudden burning sensation in his eyes just to get an upgrade. He hated that scorching feeling with a passion. A moment later, his eyes were watering like crazy from the pain, but finally, it was over. His current vision is still a far cry from a regular human's, but he'll just have to deal for now. Now he has to spend his only skill point. Luckily, this decision wasn't hard because he'd had his eye on one skill for a long time, and that skill is tunnel sense. He's been in this hellhole for a few days now, but is still totally clueless about most of the place. This world has way too many mysteries, so tunnel sense could be a literal lifesaver in the long run. Using this new ability, he can basically expand his range of action. It'll let him scout further from a safe zone while ensuring he can find his way back to his only relatively safe shelter, his nest. When Gandalf asked for confirmation, Anthony happily agreed with a smile on his tiny face. Gaining a new skill felt completely different from the pain of body mutation. He described it like the feeling of water running through your hair in the shower, except the flow was deep inside his head. A bit later, Gandalf announced that tunnel sense had been learned. He can only hope it pays off during his next expedition. Anthony gathered some leaves in the cave and made a bed. For the next mission, he deserved a good, comfy sleep. While he was fast asleep, the sound of footsteps was getting closer. 2 figures who looked human were trekking through the thick forest with a single light source. The woman asked the man if he saw anything. He reassured her it was nothing, just his mind playing tricks on him lately. Besides, no matter where they go, any monster that dares threaten them will be taught a lesson they won't forget. With his stomach no longer growling from hunger, Anthony felt like he was sleeping on Cloud 9 in pure bliss. It was so cozy he wished he could stay here forever. But his dream paradise was cut short when he woke up with a jolt. He rolled off his bed and face-planted onto the hard ground below. Thinking back, he should have seen that coming. Dreams like they're always too good to be true. But it helped him wake up and stop simping for things out of reach. Time to focus on scouting and planning for his next prey. Ant Boy Anthony gave a devious smirk before getting down to business. There was something else he wanted to try. Using his antennae to make a heart shape, he shouted, "Unlock," in his head like a magical girl. When that didn't work, he tried the keyword access codex. He thought about using Gandalf's example, open sesame, like in the movies, but didn't even bother trying. He really thought one of those would do the trick. After eating the lizard, Gandalf announced he'd unlocked the basic codex for Spinetail Lizardos, but he was struggling to find the right keyword to pull that damn thing up. It just hit him that maybe he'd been overthinking this whole process. So he let go of the nest ceiling, dropped to the floor, and yelled the lizard's Latin name while doing a superhero landing. Surprise, surprise, it actually worked. The entire basic codec for his first prey opened up. Gandalf is actually reliable at times like this. Spinetail Lizardos can be translated as spiny lizard. It has sharp spikes filled with dangerous venom. After all that trouble, that tiny bit of info was all he got. It was pretty mid, but Anthony needed to chill. Anyway, it clearly stated it was just the basic codex. Maybe the system works in stages. If he hunts and eats more of the same species, he might access a more detailed codex with juicier info. He decided to set that aside. He had more pressing matters to deal with since it was time for his next mission. The trip back to monitor the residents at the pool felt much lighter as he crawled along the ceiling humming a tune. A new day, another monster about to become prey. At a glance, not much seemed to have changed since he went back to the nest after the feast. However, he noticed a slight difference with his newly buffed +2 eyes. The pool below seemed to glow a bit more vibrantly than before. What he was most curious about was the pool and its water. On his first day, he almost became a snack for the Kroga beast. But even after running for his life, he wasn't thirsty at all. On the 3rd day, he found leaves for a bed and still wasn't thirsty. On the 6th day, when he finally stuffed himself with lizard meat, he still didn't crave a single drop of water. While those monsters traveled far just to drink from the pool, Anthony, a monster and himself, wasn't thirsty at all. He's a monster too, right? So what drives the other cave dwellers to drink that water while he has no urge? Is there a fundamental difference between them and him? With those questions in his head, Anthony knew what he had to do next. He scurried down from the ceiling to investigate the mysterious pool water and survive to tell the tale. Going down there could be extremely dangerous, so it was best to take baby steps. Even facing the dangerous centipedes, he had to remind himself not to go too far or too fast while watching the beast around him. Indeed, a huge percentage of creatures in this damp place were lizard-like. There was the bipedal Kroga beast and the spiny lizard. Every beast had some reptilian traits on its body. Maybe this is some kind of pattern. While lost in thought, he didn't notice a wolf lizard curiously and aggressively moving toward him. Just as it was about to pounce on Anthony, the dog started nervously backing away, leaving our ant boy confused. Looking behind him, it seemed the wolf lizard was wary of a giant centipede. Anthony luckily dodged the wolf lizard's attention, but that monster centipede was a different story. The whole pack of them slithered and hissed like oversized, disgusting mutant insects, their blood-red eyes locked onto the lone ant. Seeing them hold back, Anthony silently thanked the heavens that his theory was right. You might be wondering why an ant who always put survival first would risk exposing himself at the pool right now. Well, there's only one reason he dared to show himself to monsters that could kill him in a heartbeat. After days of observing the residents' behavior, he hadn't seen a single creature get attacked while approaching, drinking, or leaving the pool. Not even once. It was like some kind of neutral zone. Even though there were plenty of scraps during his lizard hunting days, the monsters always settled their beef outside the pool area. The conclusion was that there had to be something special about this water source that forced the monsters to chill, and Anthony was dead sure it had nothing to do with just staying hydrated. He knew he couldn't resist his curiosity. But he really didn't want to drink that pool water at all. Anthony finally steeled himself, closed his eyes, and dipped his face into the pool to take a sip of the mystery liquid. His instant reaction was to jump up and roll around because the water burned his tongue like hellfire. The bit of water he accidentally swallowed felt like a fire in his gut. It felt like drinking hydrochloric acid. For some unknown reason, this is actually what countless creatures trek all the way here to find. Do they really come here every day just to drink this hot, stinging, painful death water? If so, what the hell is wrong with them? Did Anthony reincarnate into a cave full of masochist monsters? No, he still couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. Besides the burning sensation, his health barely changed at all. Based on its blockbuster movie-level appeal, he expected something epic to happen since these monsters seemed obsessed with this water day in and day out. But for him, it did absolutely nothing. Nothing showed up, so having finished his mission, he decided to go explore the rest of the cave elsewhere. Before leaving, he couldn't resist taking one more gulp. This time, he tried to chug as hard as possible, downing as much liquid as his tiny body could hold. Just like before, it was a total scorcher. He had to roll all over the floor, spitting out everything he just swallowed because the pain was too much. After barfing up most of the pool water, he decided the stuff was nothing but gross. He made a mental note to never try that garbage again, no matter what. Now that he had somewhat investigated the pool mystery, it was time to expand his scouting range to the rest of the cave and map out the tunnel network with his new tunnel sense. With his newly gained ability, traveling became much simpler. All he had to do was head toward the areas with the thickest glowing veins. Plus, he suddenly caught a scent from afar, which made him wonder if there were other kinds of creatures lurking in these strange tunnels. After racking his brain while moving nonstop, he accidentally stumbled upon something quite familiar, a man-made structure, designed to bridge large vertical gaps between low and high floors by breaking them down into shorter distances. Those were definitely stairs. Looking down the staircase, Anthony noticed the winding blue veins appear there too. Driven by curiosity and hype, he hurried down to get a closer look. It seemed these steps were carved directly into the rock. There were even intricate decorative patterns on each step. So who exactly was the one who chiseled this solid rock? That was the question he excitedly asked himself. Humans, obviously. This was the first tangible evidence he'd found showing the existence of any humanoid species in this new world. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of fantasy races lived here. Anthony daydreamed about rescuing mighty dwarves from a threat to their existence. Or maybe meeting legendary and mysterious elves famous for their longevity and peak beauty. Whatever he encountered, he had to admit things were getting more and more interesting. He was halfway down the stairs when he started wondering why humans would bother carving stairs into this specific tunnel and not others. Well, to a self-proclaimed genius like him, the answer was almost too obvious. The path he was on had to be a frequently used tunnel, so they put in some effort to make traveling up and down easier. This meant there was a high chance of more stairs in the vicinity. Maybe there was even a path leading to the surface where he could escape this miserable, danger-filled cave. That possibility gave Anthony the guts to keep going. Let's send it. As he headed down the spiral, he realized these steps were even more useful than he first thought. He couldn't believe he hadn't thought of this idea sooner. He could actually use these steps to measure his own size. Assuming people in this world are about the same size as those in his old world, he could compare his size to the stairs. He could get a rough estimate of how big he was based on those variables. After doing the math, Anthony concluded he might be a bit smaller than he originally thought. Judging by the height and length of each step compared to his build, he was probably about 1 meter tall. But wait, this meant all those scary giant monsters in the pool would be pretty small from a human perspective. Sure, in Anthony's eyes, they looked like giants that could easily stomp enemies. But from an adult's perspective, they were probably only as big as normal animals in his old world. This made Anthony question the difficulty level of the monsters in this area. Were they actually just super weak tutorial monsters on easy mode? But that line of thought opened up a scarier possibility. If the monsters here were weak, he didn't even want to know what kind of high-level beasts were lurking deeper inside. With that thought, he decided not to dive headfirst into a death trap this time. Peace out to this dangerous staircase. But as he stepped onto another floor, Anthony noticed even more signs of human activity. There were torches on the walls. The further he went, the more signs of civilization appeared. Maybe the surface is closer than we think. He went deeper into the tunnel. The further he went, the fewer glowing veins pulsed along the walls. Even though this setting was perfect for a stealthy creature like him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His heart was pounding. In his chest, like it was about to burst with mixed emotions. There's a very real possibility of meeting a real person from another world. Wouldn't that be sick? So many questions were already in his head. What do they look like? What fantasy race would they be? Do they know magic? Maybe there's an adventurer's guild exploring the dungeon. Maybe he could communicate with them through sign language or some crazy dancing. Anthony's mind was racing, imagining a macro-level breakthrough in human-ant relations. He was pretty sure. It's rare for humans to encounter a fellow human soul trapped in a monster's body. He might be the first case ever. As he ventured deeper into the cave, it started getting narrower and steeper. Soon, a blinding light engulfed his blurry vision. Looking up, there was a hole in the cave ceiling, and if he wasn't mistaken, sunlight was streaming in. This was the first time he'd seen and felt the sun. He low-key apologized to the holy light for taking this luxury for granted in his past life. With the discovery of sunlight, he figured the surface world was way closer than he originally thought. Looking the other way, there seemed to be more light sources ahead, meaning more human structures. Before he could finish that thought, Anthony spotted a wooden door slightly ajar. Judging by the architecture, he figured it might be a guard room sitting in the middle of some dungeon. But what was even more curious was the red light glowing from the guardroom window. This light was different because it was moving along with the sound of hurried footsteps. Who would have thought? Actual humans, in the flesh, wearing light armor and holding some kind of lighting device. Anthony just stood there frozen, amazed by their gear, which could detect monster presence. Since these caves were pitch black, it must be a nightmare to navigate and find what they need. While the woman held the device, the man started channeling magical light from both hands. It felt unreal to see it in person, but Anthony guessed this was magic. Actual magic. He praised Gandalf for dropping him into a world of magic. He even started wondering if these people would teach him a few spells or something. While our boy was foaming at the mouth with excitement over the possibilities, the man started pointing his hands toward Anthony. Wait, wasn't that red crystal supposed to detect monsters? Which means it's currently working. He was so caught up in the moment that he forgot he was a monster too. Anthony found himself target-locked by a spell. He was cooked. It wasn't supposed to go down like this, right? He just had a little mix-up, but the move right now was to haul ass like a bug. Run, Anthony, run. He tried to beg the humans for mercy, but he didn't have the ability to speak. To make matters worse, he tripped over a loose rock while trying to escape. Anthony wanted to explain he was just a tiny, harmless ant, but a fireball made of mana was already flying his way. He didn't take a direct hit, but his legs were aching from the trip up and the sprint. His brain said move, but his legs weren't listening. Trapped and immobilized, more fireballs were launched at the poor ant. He had to channel every bit of willpower left in his muscle for the next sprint, using stone pillars for cover. Even using cover was useless. From another angle, a single arrow nearly pierced his abdomen. If he wanted to survive this clutch situation, he'd need a major distraction, but first, he had to secure an escape route to safety. He shuffled through random tunnels, using tunnel sense to judge if the path was viable. After 3 turns, Anthony hit a path with a nasty stench coming from inside. The humans had caught up, so he decided to fight like a monster and spat 2 acid shots at each of them. It didn't really slow them down effectively. It only made them fire back with another arrow. Anthony's reflexes were getting cracked. He ducked and dodged the arrow whistling past him. One thing was for sure. His attempt at human-monster ant diplomacy just went up in smoke. Countless fireballs desperately chased the lone ant like they were heat-seeking missiles. Anthony had been running so long he couldn't see straight, slamming into a jagged rock. But thanks to Gandalf's blessing, he survived and caught his breath inside a small tunnel. Realizing what just happened, he started beating himself up for handling the situation so stupidly. He forgot to remind himself that he wasn't human anymore, and accordingly, his human privilege had been revoked. From now on, he had to consider the fact that he was a 3-foot-long monster ant in every interaction. On the other side of the small tunnel, threatening hisses could be heard. He might have messed up before, but he needed to lock back in immediately. Anthony had to weigh his options. Face the hissing centipede mob on the other side, or the fireballs from the humans behind him. But when the guy kept chasing him with fire, peeking into the small tunnel with killer intent, it looked like the choice was made for him. Anthony floored it and started running for his life as another barrage of fireballs began to condense in the man's hands. Luckily, he was fast enough to vanish into the darkness before the spell finished casting. Using tunnel sense, he navigated the narrow underground passages like a pro, sensing the centipedes weren't far off. He calmed himself with an improvised plan. All he had to do was use the centipede beasts as bait for the humans. Lucky for him, he had the stealth skill to hide his presence from those gross and dangerous forbidden noodles. He calculated that he could use an acid shot as a surefire way to aggro these insects, but what happened next would decide his fate. Escaping the angry mob would be a race against time on extreme mode, and he doubted if he could even pull it off. Turning off stealth, he knew he had no other choice. It was now or never, do or die. He carefully pointed his rear at the crowd and started spraying corrosive acid at the beasts. It was a perfectly aimed splash shot, hitting almost every centipede in the swarm. But the acid wasn't strong or corrosive enough to pierce through their bodies. But that was fine. He wasn't expecting to bag any kills anyway. But he achieved his goal. He aggroed those deadly centipedes, and they immediately chased after our poor ant boy with their countless long legs. Now the race against time had officially started. After a few minutes of running for his life, Anthony wanted to cry out because of the mess he'd gotten into. Reaching the entrance of the tunnel system took way too much time. Damn, at this rate, his stamina would be tapped out before he could pull off the bait plan. Along the way, there were even a few close calls where he almost got eaten alive as the centipedes lunged at him with powerful bites. Seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, Anthony felt a surge of energy. On the other side, salvation was waiting. Like a crazed insect, he burst out of the small tunnel where the man was waiting to char his skin off. The man didn't expect a giant insect party, as the centipede swarm also poured out of the hole like disgusting trains. Anthony landed safely amidst the chaos. All that was left to do was ghost them. But that was easier said than done when a horrific crawling monster was so triggered it chased him to the ends of the earth. Running was useless now. He just curled his body up and kept chanting a mantra that he didn't want to die. As if Anthony's desperate prayer reached the ears of the gods, the forbidden lobsters started exploding before they could touch him. You ask who's blowing up and slicing through the giant centipedes? Well, it was the humans from the other side of the tunnel trying to catch an ant. Anthony kept his head low, not daring to draw any aggro or violence toward himself. He wondered if this was his chance to escape the chaos. He low-key apologized as he carefully crawled across the battlefield. It would have been a perfect escape if a few leftover centipedes hadn't spotted and chased him like stubborn little pests. He was so preoccupied with what was happening behind him that he accidentally slammed right into a human's leg up front. Anthony slid backward just before the human's twisted spear could skewer him from above. Moreover, the spear thrust that was meant for him ended up hitting the leftover centipedes that were clinging to him. Once again, Anthony thanked the Gandalf system for blessing him with such cracked luck. He'd been repeatedly spared thanks to the perfectly timed intervention of a higher power. He really wanted to stand the long-bearded wizard some more, but he was still in deep trouble. His luck wouldn't be enough to stop two enemies trying to catch up from behind. Enemy number 1, the human guards, and enemy number 2, the centipede beasts. After putting some distance between himself and the chaos, Anthony managed to pop his stealth skill. He planned his next move. Where could he hide in this place? He saw an open doorway leading to God knows where and decided that would do for now. He managed to find a hiding spot thanks to his stealth skill and some sneaky movement. From behind the walls of the doorway, he watched the war between humans and centipedes that he'd sparked. He felt bad for pitting his fellow monsters against the human guards, but the situation left him with no choice. It was a choice between dying by a human blade and being blown up by their magic, or letting his neighbors scrap with the guards. Meanwhile, in the quiet city of Lyria, The diligent Commander Titus was in his office working late into the night. The wrinkles on his face grew deeper from the stress caused by some damn idiots who couldn't just leave the dungeon situation to him and the Legion. If it were up to the veteran commander, he'd be in the dungeon 24/7 instead of being locked in a dark office burning candles, doing pointless paperwork. These days, his job consisted of repeating the same thing a million times to morons who couldn't tell left from right, instead of getting a chance to swing his favorite weapon. He almost smashed his desk in half out of frustration. That was his wake-up call to chill out and breathe some mana-rich air for a moment, stepping out of the dim office. The forward garrison soldiers outside stood up to salute the commander. Commander Titus didn't acknowledge their presence. He just walked straight out of the hall. Another heavy door opened, and another group of organized soldiers stood at attention to salute their brave leader. Wherever he went, people stopped what they were doing. He was like a god in this place. The commander walked straight until he reached a simple wooden door with 2 armed guards on either side. Commander Titus asked Tribunalia for a sitrep, and she diligently complied. 15 minutes ago, a monster approached this guard post before fleeing. The guard team signaled the Centurion on duty before heading deeper into the cave. From the human guard's POV, they were dealing with a hideous ant monster. They were chasing something that deserved to be killed with the hottest fire and the sharpest blade. Titus felt that the escape was strange. He confirmed whether the monster had attacked head-on or had just fled. He immediately turned toward the humble wooden door, causing Officer Aurelia to panic and ask where he was going. The commander casually replied that he was simply joining the expedition personally. Commander Titus's interest was piqued by reports of a monster smart enough to run from danger. Behind the wooden door, the guards were still busy fighting a fierce war against the centipedes. The mages were dropping their strongest spells to incinerate the beasts. No matter how aggressive the centipedes were, they were no match for the power of mana. Anthony tried to find a better position, but got stuck in the middle of the chaos, only able to rely on his stealth skill to stay safe. Anyone with eyes could see this fight between humans and beasts wasn't even a match anymore. At this point, it was just a one-sided slaughter. Anthony was helpless, too weak to add any value to this fight. He couldn't exactly shred the enemies with long-range mandible attacks or anything like that. In times like this when he's clueless, he always has to ask Gandalf what he should do. Instead of getting advice from Gandalf, he got a crisp slap from a familiar human figure. It was Human Form Anthony. He thanked Human Anthony for the much-needed wake-up slap in this desperate hour. Looking on the bright side, this streak of bad luck confirmed a lot of things he'd been wondering about. First, it verified the existence of magic in the form of human spells. Second, a human society exists in this world. Also, the power gap between his aunt's self and humans is real, and it's massive. Another lesson he learned that was a total game changer. The king of stats right now is HP. After getting hit by rock shards and scorched by fireballs, his HP hit critical levels. He was down to 15 HP, basically half dead. But at least he knew how much damage he could tank in a fight. The price of that lesson was that he now had to find a way to heal back up. Thinking of a way to get back to 100, he guessed his HP would auto-regen over time, but it might be more complex, and he'd need to patch himself up somehow. Anyway, he couldn't waste the golden opportunity that the war he sparked had laid out before him. Several monster carcasses were scattered on the ground like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Some were even perfectly roasted by the fire. Right now he needed to focus because there was a mountain of biomass waiting to be inhaled. Anthony acted on his most primal instinct to eat those stronger than him, get swole, and stack biomass by the second. It took him quite a while to go from one end of the feast to the other, but the harvest was a total W. By the end, he was so stuffed it was hard to move or even breathe. Throughout the process, he kept imagining a royal banquet just like Gandalf intended. In his head, the centipedes were cooked to perfection and plated beautifully. But reality is always mid when the meat hits the tongue and slides down the throat. There's no denying it. These monster centipedes tasted straight up offensive. Thinking about the nasty amount of meat he just consumed, Anthony couldn't help but blow chunks everywhere. Taste aside, the amount of biomass he secured was what really mattered. His royal feast unlocked the basic profile for the prey species, Angiosperms kilopendra. He popped that damn thing open immediately, and it was useless as usual. It just said claw centipedes have strong pincers and poisonous tail spikes. Before spending his hard-earned biomass, he wanted to peep his stats first. Everything was progressing smoothly in terms of skills and stats. Plus, his HP had started a slight recovery after a while. Now he had 2 biomass points to blow on whatever he wanted. According to the gospel of the system, it sustains all beings, but only when humanity unites can they chase the endgame, dropping himself into his cozy nest. Anthony could finally chill after a hectic day. All he could do was pray to the great Gandalf for a more peaceful day tomorrow. He was planning to knock out 2 major tasks. First, evolving his eyes to +3. He desperately needed one more biomass point for that upgrade. To make sure there were no slip-ups, he calculated that moving the nest had to happen right after. After a quick nap, Anthony got to work. As soon as he stepped out of his cozy nest, he saw the war between humans and centipedes was still popping off. So much for his perfect day. Still, the work wasn't going to do itself. Staying ghost, Anthony headed away from the flaming battlefield. He skillfully crossed the caves in stealth mode, wondering what the hell these soldiers were doing in this cursed place. They were doing the most to wipe out every monster they encountered. Reaching the mysterious lake, Anthony discovered human soldiers had occupied the area. He saw high-tech gear and strange crystals floating over the water and was low-key mesmerized. Anthony shook his head and kept his mind locked on the goal. This was no time to fanboy over magic at the cost of his safety. Day by day, the dream of making it out of here alive seemed further and further away. It would be pure coke to think he could sneak past a whole battalion in his current state. Staying in the nest also came with the risk of getting raided. Realistically, there was only one viable option right now. But without the right upgrades, that choice would definitely lead to an early grave. He probably wouldn't even get an ant-sized coffin. Right now, the only path forward was a terrifying one. Back to square one, the den of the Croca beast. One last time, he choked back a goodbye to the nest that had kept him safe until now. He'd had some great times in that hole. If only he had some ant homies to hang with, it would have been a real home. Speaking of ant homies, this was the perfect time to find the colony where he was born. If he could reunite with the swarm and live with his own kind, this life might not be so bad. Anyway, the beast that snatched him before he was born probably didn't go too far from the main nest. If he remembered correctly, the ant nest had to be in one of the 3 caves from his starting point. Choosing optimism in the face of uncertainty, Anthony set out. His ultimate goal was to find the queen and his ant brothers. Maybe he could give Mom a hug when they reunite, leaving the lake and following the light. Anthony moved at full throttle. He noticed the veins on the cave walls had become brighter than before. What's more, they were pulsing faster. It was a truly bizarre sight. Reaching the end of the vein tunnel, he slowed down and carefully scouted ahead, hoping no threats were waiting to pounce. After observing the open space in front of him, he breathed a sigh of relief. Safe for now. To find the most optimal path from here, Anthony activates Tunnel Sense. Mapping out this mysterious place will keep him away from the cursed surface and that obnoxious human army. After a few minutes of scouting, his antennae start picking up a signal. About 100 meters from his current spot, he can sense a distinct change in the air. Locking onto that change, he focuses all his antennae's attention in that direction. He was so caught up following the trail that he slammed his head straight into a wall. The signal keeps heading forward, but there are 2 paths that could lead there. Gandalf must be demanding he make a choice and pick one of the 2. After a quick scan and relying on his gut, both options look pretty sketchy. With no other choice, he dumps all his bank biomass into upgrading his antennae to buff his accuracy. Just like when he upgraded his vision, this level up brings a burning pain that has him rolling on the ground. He curses that heartless Gandalf for making him suffer just for a slim chance at survival. With his refined senses, he confirms that one of the paths has a faint but promising scent. One of the passages feels way less like a sudden death sentence, so the choice was fairly easy. After weighing it carefully, Anthony decides to make a move and head forward. His motto today is slow and steady wins the race. Halfway there, his antennae stand straight up as hype fills his tiny body. He just caught a whiff of pheromones. By using pheromone glands, ants can leave trails for others to detect and follow. This could be it. After surviving solo for what felt like forever, his ant brothers are finally calling him home. If he could see what was waiting on the other side of the path, he wouldn't be celebrating at all. Web traps are scattered everywhere, while a creature patiently waits for its clueless victims. Anthony moves like the wind, following what he thinks are his kind's pheromones. He's beyond stoked, thinking the colony is calling him, lighting the beacon to bring a brother back. Halfway through, he checks himself. He can't afford to overextend here. He still remembers the price of being too thirsty. His HP still hasn't maxed out yet. He'll have to keep heading down this unknown path until he finds a safer passage somewhere. As he moves forward, he notices the tunnel getting more and more erratic, zigzagging in every random direction. While the route gets more chaotic, the vibrations in the air get stronger. His gut tells him something is about to go down. Finally, he hits a bottleneck. The tunnel splits into a messy web of passages. He started to get dizzy trying to track which way is safe to pick. Luckily, those days of running around caves paid off. His tunnel sense hit level 2, improving his underground navigation. This skill is his most reliable tool for positioning in these winding paths of the mystery cave. To back up his tunnel sense, Anthony plans to create and maintain a simple set of symbols to mark the routes he's taken. Hopefully, it helps. The first choice is always the hardest, but he quickly picks the path on the right. Taking this path wasn't as lucky as he thought. The route isn't very long, so he reaches the clearing on the other side pretty fast. There, he sees a pack of lizard-tail rats gnawing on the bones of some unlucky prey. Anthony pulls an immediate U-turn with his ant, and hauls ass back to the previous room. He tries to catch his breath while plotting his next move after that first fail. Walking to the entrance of the far right path, he wonders what symbol would fit for sudden death to keep it simple. He crawls onto the tunnel ceiling and marks it with a simple X, hoping this process will eventually lead him somewhere more viable, a place that's a bit more manageable. Heading through the next tunnel, he feels safe, almost cozy. Actually, that's the kind of feeling that gets you killed. Thankfully, instinct saved him from being complacent. While moving along the wall, he catches a glimpse of spiderweb, neatly spun and expertly hidden. Without level 2 vision, he definitely would have walked right into this trap. He wouldn't have spotted it in time. Walking headfirst into enemy territory would be the end of his story. Honestly, Anthony is salty as hell. Those stupid spiders probably think they're kings of the insect world just because they can spin something fancy to eat others. The way he sees it, those freaks are just a bunch of lazy bums letting a web do all the heavy lifting instead of getting off there, but it's working. He sees honest and straightforward worker ants as the peak of honor. If he had about 200 brothers here to command, he'd never have to tuck tail from a spider. No words can describe the pure hate he has for those web-slinging freaks. Deciding to push forward to scout the situation, Anthony's speed slows to a crawl. He sees webs everywhere, but the architect is nowhere to be found. That doesn't mean it's not nearby. Gathering intel is the top priority right now. It's the best way to figure out the most optimal path forward. Once he escaped that sticky, nasty area, he crawled back to the ground where the traps were more scattered. Using his mandibles, Anthony snapped a loose pebble off the floor. With a bit of momentum, he hurled the pebble at the giant spider webs, trashing the intricate trap with just one throw. Seeing that stone throwing was an effective way to clear the path, he kept at it. Anthony picked up another pebble with his jaws and practiced his throw. He was like the Shohei Ohtani of pegging rocks at spider webs. Once he cleared enough webs to open a relatively safe passage, he dashed forward. He knew the architect of this death trap was definitely lurking nearby. By trashing the web structure and letting the pebble stick to it, the monster would finally have to show its face. Just as expected, the arachnid freak finally showed its ugly mug. It's probably thinking lunch just got delivered. With just one look, Anthony almost gagged at such a hideous thing. That thing had 8 hairy legs that could barely support its fat, bloated body. Compared to the perfect 3-part body and 6 agile limbs of an ant, spiders are just a straight-up abomination. The one in front of him might not even be a high-level monster. If this multi-legged demon would just sit still for a sec, he could line up a shot for a long-range attack. Wiggling his butt to aim precisely, Anthony held still until the last second for maximum accuracy. Once he accounted for the wind and positioning, he fired his acid. The nasty green liquid splashed all over the hairy monster. The effects were felt immediately. Hair and flesh let out a gruesome sizzle as they were scorched and melted away. Unfortunately, even with a few upgrades, his vision still couldn't match a regular spider's. Luckily, he had stealth to make up for his flaws. He whiffed the first shot. The damage was brutal, but it only hit one of the spider's many legs. After that opening attack, Anthony quietly stalked the confused spider. It clearly thought it was safe in the shadows, but Anthony's stalking skills were top tier. Once he got a better angle thanks to stealth, he fired a second acid shot with absolute confidence. This time the toxin hit the bullseye. The sizzling grew louder as the spider was melted while still alive. To rub salt in the wound, Anthony deactivated stealth and intentionally taunted the spider to chase him. This was the only way he could pull that coward away from its home turf advantage. Despite talking big, Anthony admitted he was shaking inside his armor at the thought of the spider's incoming rage. At least he reached the safe zone before it could catch up. In a worst-case scenario, maybe he'd loop back to where the wolf lizards were hanging out. That way, he could let the spider and the wolves slaughter each other while he watched from the sidelines. In a perfect world, those dumb dogs would immediately shift their focus to the charging multi-legged monster the moment he went invisible. If Anthony could ghost through that cave to safety, you could call it the perfect crime. Fortunately, he didn't have to rely on a plan with too many unpredictable variables. The injured and enraged spider seemed just as cautious as he was. It makes sense. Why would that jerk move when it can just sit in its web and wait for some dumb prey to deliver itself? After a good meal, that spider would definitely fully recover. Anthony imagined if he were a spider, he could literally create a territory where food finds him, gets trapped, and he just harvests free biomass. He cursed spiders, because they get to play on easy mode in this brutal dungeon. His anger was peaking. To cool off, Anthony decided that Spider had to die ASAP. A day had passed since the first encounter. Despite being salty, he meticulously calculated his win rate. After weighing everything, he concluded the advantage was leaning his way. First, the tunnel was unusually bright. Even though his vision was only at +2, the light helped it perform well, and spotting the enemy wouldn't be too hard. Second, based on rough estimates of their stats, he and the spider seemed evenly matched as long as he could negate the web advantage. With all these factors, he could probably secure some fresh biomass and vent his anger if everything went smooth. The only question left was how to lure that freak out of its web. Phase 1 was complete. With the 2 acid attacks yesterday, he probably chipped off about 5 of that monster's HP. The safest way for this hunt was to keep harassing the spider, ambushing the poor thing repeatedly until Anthony took the W. After all, just one bite from those venomous fangs could put him in deep trouble. With his antennae standing straight up and facing forward, eyes wide open and brain focused solely on the hunt, Anthony set out. He couldn't afford to make even a single mistake. It didn't take long for him to reach the web-choked path. He scouted every inch, and at first, there was no sign of the architect. Luckily, he stumbled upon a clutch of spider eggs hidden nearby. It's a bit savage, but these would be the best tools to bait the bug out of hiding. Recalling the pebbles from yesterday, he started throwing the eggs onto the web, hoping this would convince the spider that some fat prey got snagged. Anthony kept throwing them without stopping until his archenemy finally revealed itself. After throwing the last egg onto the web, all that was left was to sit back, wait, and watch. He hid behind a nearby rock, with a clear line of sight toward the eggs. A few hours passed, and there was still no sign of that coward. Maybe it had become too yellow after what happened last time. To be sure, he picked up a pebble and chucked it straight at the egg stuck there. Seeing the old trick didn't work, he decided to pivot to phase 2 of the plan. This phase required a bit more finesse instead of raw power. He picked up small, loose pebbles off the ground, the kind that wouldn't shake or snap the web like heavier rocks, instead of throwing them. He gently placed them along the web, causing almost zero movement. Using this technique, he planned to cross the silk wall on the low. With enough coverage, he'd be able to infiltrate the inner sanctum without tripping any alarms. Once he created a big enough gap using the silent technique, Anthony cautiously pushed deeper into enemy territory. He had never gone this deep into uncharted territory before. He had to be extra careful since there could be hidden silk strands underfoot. Just a split second of losing focus could leave him stuck with no way out. A mistake like that could be a death sentence. Just minutes after his silent break-in, all his senses screamed about a threat coming from behind. The spider must have been stalking him this whole time. That clown was patient enough to wait for him to enter its home turf, but stupid enough to approach from behind. Anthony opened his rear vent and fired another acid shot. It was a critical hit. Now, there was only one thing left to do to close the deal. With a mocking laugh, Anthony bolted out of that web-filled territory while dropping some savage insults. He really felt like he was too cool, feeling like he was one with the wind through the fjords. An antelope gliding across the meadow. Anthony got too cocky and got snagged by a loose silk strand midair. He tripped and face-planted, cursing himself for acting like a total idiot. Now he might die before ever seeing his colony or even another fellow ant again. Anthony started crying hysterically. He was still too young to die. He wasn't even a month old yet. He'd been crying for a whole minute and nothing terrible had happened. Turns out that loose strand was incredibly easy to break. When he turned around, he found the big scary spider lying with its legs up in the air, its belly still sizzling from the acid shot. He had seriously overrated this arachnid monster. Eating the prey gave him a fresh source of biomass, the poor Aronia. Turns out it was just a newborn spider monster. Anthony the Baby Killer. That title actually fits. He worried that biting into that tiny bit of meat wouldn't even give him a single biomass point. He admitted the rage he took out on the poor bug was clearly misplaced. After just a few acid shots, it was toasted. There was no way for it to recover instantly. Its health had quickly tanked to 0. The XP he gained from the kill wasn't much to write home about either. What surprised him was that he earned 2 biomass points for unlocking a new species and eating its corpse. With a much calmer vibe, he left the webbed-up area while trashing the sticky obstacles along the way. Right now, level 3 vision was within reach. Once his vision was out of the life-threatening range, he could finally focus on upgrading other parts of his body. Maybe he'd actually be able to scrap with something without relying on cheese tactics. But he was getting ahead of himself. He couldn't rely on wishful thinking. Anthony needed to lock back in and find a way to evolve into a mature ant. The most obvious way was to stack more EXP to level up for that to happen. He needed to set up a spot where he could hunt safely. As usual, he went deeper into the winding tunnels with stealth mode active, away from the spider nest. Not far away, he spotted a bizarre sight. A massive, bottomless pit stretching down into who knows where. It's safe to assume the deeper it goes, the more dangerous it gets. If that's the case, maybe this place shouldn't be explored right now. Save it for later, when he's more confident in his survival skills. In the worst-case scenario, this is the only path he can take. Using his upgraded antennae, he tried to direct his tunnel sense downward to gauge the danger, but it was too deep to scan accurately. As long as he had a choice, he'd rather not go deeper into this ominous hole than necessary. This could be a dead end, but so was the surface land. The definite threat of death at the hands of humans was looming above. Anthony was basically sandwiched between two extremely dangerous choices. It was a total headache of a puzzle. Since he'd eventually have to explore all options anyway, he'd rather turn back and check some other routes. After skirting around the edge of the pit, he stumbled upon a few branching tunnels nearby. In this place, more paths usually means having to deal with more monsters. A few more hours of exploring had Anthony starting to question himself. He suspected he just walked into a loop, and the tunnel he chose just led right back to the first one he came out of. This time he encountered a few more new species while looking for the right route. Whenever he hit uncharted territory, he frequently checked the wall sections he could utilize. After scouting around and making sure the spot he chose had enough structural stability, his jaws got to work digging a temporary nest to take a break. With this new burrow to hide in, he'll feel a bit more shielded from the outside world. Even though it's flimsy and rushed, it's still better than chilling out in the open where threats are lurking everywhere. This time he didn't dig too deep. He chose a spot where he could set up a high-ground observation nest with a perfect view of the action on the floor. Making this new nest unexpectedly boosted his digging skill to level 4. Anthony felt pretty good about himself. Even if this skill is kind of useless in a scrap, it's nice to know he's making gains in some areas. Thinking back on his short time in this dungeon, he's quite proud of his cracked progress. He's still just a small fry, but he's come a long way from where he started. His skills have leveled up after being forged in clutch situations and near-death experiences. He has to admit he's still pathetic in a fight compared to other species, but he's just getting started. Now, if he wants to scout this new, unfamiliar terrain, he'll need to catch some Z's to stay in peak condition. Anthony used to keep insects in the past. He knows that ants don't usually sleep. They just stand still and enter a low-power mode called torpor to save energy. Even so, he still likes the feeling of closing his eyes figuratively, even though he literally has no eyelids. It's probably a leftover habit from his human days. After a full night's rest, Anthony's mind is refreshed and hitting peak performance. Now it's time to push the expedition into the unknown. His goal today is to bag one more biomass point to buff his vision. Then he can finally experiment with the rest of his build. In theory, he could focus on stronger legs, his carapace, mandibles, or acid glands. Any of these upgrades would make hunting much smoother and safer. Kills mean XP to level up. Boosting his stats will practically contribute to his evolution into a mature ant. His stealth skill hit level 3. Hopefully, he can grind it higher by tailing some of the new monsters in the area. Unfortunately, the first turn led him right back to a marked tunnel. It looks exactly like the path extending from the cave he already cleared. This time he definitely went in circles, only to end up near the area where the soldiers are grouped up. On the bright side, a mental map of the area is starting to take shape. It includes the larger main tunnels and smaller ones winding in random directions. Basically, the big tunnels act like highways where the biggest threats hang out and move, while the small ones are like alleys where weaker enemies chill. Anthony wasted a ton of time on one wrong turn. His day is off to a mid-start. With a better grasp of the area, he made a smarter move this time. Hopefully, he finds what he's looking for on this path. He was so locked in on finding a new biomass source that he didn't even notice his tunnel sense had climbed to level 3. Trying to map the tunnels with higher accuracy must have dumped a lot of XP into tunnel sense. It feels a bit weird thinking the system might be monitoring his thoughts near his temporary nest. He noted 2 new types of monsters lurking nearby. The first type is a 3-tailed rat. Each tail has a deadly spike at the tip. These rodents look absolutely cursed. The second type is a mollusk-like creature with a long, slimy body and colorful organic spikes. He bet these slimy jerks are definitely poisonous in some way. They're at least twice his size and can move on walls. Better stay away from their gross slime trails just to be safe. While he was weighing which target to aim for in his next hunt, Anthony heard the sweet, faint sound he'd been waiting for. Chaos roars from wild beasts, and the sound of clashing claws echoed from a tunnel just ahead. Stoked by the opportunity, he floored it toward the front like a night fox. Since he was gifted a weird, game-like system, he planned to find out exactly how it works and all its little complexities. He had a few questions. How does the system award XP when a monster dies? Is it split between everyone who dealt damage? Or is XP only given to the one who gets the finishing blow? From what he's seen so far, he's never gotten an XP notification during a fight. It always pops up after the prey has stopped breathing. This pretty much confirms that XP only drops when the enemy is dead. To answer all the questions living rent-free in his head, he'd have to test a few theories. Luckily, a perfect scenario just spawned. The chaos he heard was a full-on war between a Kroga beast and a centipede army. On Gandalf's shiny beard. Anthony hates those brainless centipedes to his core. They just swarm up and think they're all that. However, at a glance, it doesn't look like the Kroga beast is going down without a fight. It already took out a few of those nasty jerks. The reptile is doing its best to track and counter every opponent. It has the power and speed to shred those hideous monsters, but the centipedes are too slippery. With a front row seat to the match, Anthony is more than happy to third-party this fight. He has no business in once the chance pops up. As soon as he saw one centipede get stunned and slowed down, the Kroga beast lunged. At that same moment, Anthony was also ready to jump in. Just a split second before the reptile could shred the centipede, he spat a stream of concentrated acid, dealing massive damage. The pain from the melting acid completely disabled the centipede, turning it into a snack for the bite force of the deadly Kroga beast. Like a hungry predator, the reptile didn't let go once it had the prey locked in its death grip. Because it attacked too aggressively and greedily, the Kroga left an opening for a counterattack, staying ghost on the cave ceiling. Anthony watched the three remaining centipedes spread out to different corners to capitalize on their buddy's death. The first one attacked, constricting the reptile from behind, wrapping around its neck to cut off its airway. This would have been a critical hit if the centipede had constricted tightly enough right away. Unfortunately, it got swiped away by the reptile's tail. Now, knowing the tail is the weapon that needs to be neutralized, the two remaining centipedes try to take it out of the fight. They were too naive to think they could disable the Kroga beast's most effective and versatile whip weapon. While the multi-legged freaks drew all the aggro, Anthony sneakily spat a stream of acid right onto the reptile's back. With the acid burning and toxins stacking from the long scrap of the centipedes, the big reptile was moving slower by the second. On the other hand, the centipede with the acid burns retreated out of the Kroga's reach to play it safe and stay on defense. Anthony watched the fight with a smug smirk. He felt like a puppet master making these stronger creatures dance in the palm of his hand. With a third sneaky acid shot, he aimed at the sickly centipede one last time. Normally, Anthony would never dare to pull such a cheap move, but since the centipede hunt was leaning toward a total W, he had the breathing room to intervene from a distance. He highly doubted these freaks would ignore such a juicy prey just because of one tiny ant, even though the Kroga beast was slowly fading due to a barrage of wounds and poison damage. The centipedes still played it safe and kept waiting before landing the final blow. They backed off every time the reptile pushed forward. Their victim was showing clear signs of rapid exhaustion. It was going to lose its fighting spirit any second now. Even so, the prideful Kroga beast kept trying to drag even just one insect down to the grave with it. With heavy breathing, it mustered its last bit of energy for one final lunge. It was a clumsy effort to get one more kill, but the insects were ready to shut it down. Squeezing out its last bit of life force, the Kroga closed the gap one last time with pure killer intent. It aimed for the slowest centipede in the pack. Reaching out with its claws as far as possible, it managed to snag one of those creatures. Bad luck for it, though. The acid on the centipede's back had already eaten through its scales and flesh. The pain from the poison running through its veins was too much to handle. That giant didn't have any power left in its attacks. It collapsed to the ground, the impact shaking the entire cave. Anthony could feel his heart pounding in his tiny ant chest. This was the perfect scenario. Now he just needed to aim true and land the finishing blow with his last bit of acid. Seeing the centipedes starting to crawl over to claim the prize, this shot had a hit. A greedier ant would have definitely aimed for the Kroga beast, since that one would obviously give the most XP. But Anthony was more realistic. He aimed for the slowest, injured centipede. Doubling the acid damage on that multi-legged monster, it writhed in agony as it slowly succumbed to death. Just as Anthony predicted, the other centipedes ignored their dying comrade. They were only focused on feasting on the reptile's corpse. With one less mouth to feed, they happily shredded the reptile, leaving blood and guts everywhere. Since he didn't get a system notification for the Kroga beast kill, this confirmed that only the finishing blow counts for XP. Luckily, he cleanly took down the level 3 claw centipede. It gave him a massive amount of points, boosting him straight to level 3 and earning him a skill point. The Kroga beast must have dealt 80 of the damage to that thing, but Anthony snatched the whole reward. After happily taking stock of his loot, he noticed the rest of the centipedes had crawled out of their den to vulture the hard work of others. Anthony's biggest upgrade was probably his stealth skill, which hit level 5. He couldn't help but stand the great Gandalf for granting such a generous reward. His wisdom, soft beard, and majestic eyebrows were truly top tier. Let's look further ahead and see what's going down in the human surface world. Albertan, the lore master of the Abyssal Legion in Lyria, had been studying the monster waves starting from the Great Cataclysm. Today, Scholar Albertan was on his way to a high-stakes meeting at the Royal Palace with Commander Titus. They were making small talk, and it sounded like these two hadn't known each other forever. Albertan was pretty cranky today. Clearly annoyed about having to attend the meeting, he looked over today's agenda. A formal call to arms before the entire court is never just a routine meeting. Commander Titus admitted that everything had been set up by Albertan's dear aunt. The scholar wasn't hyped about facing that woman. Commander Titus praised him for growing into a brave and principled legionnaire. With respect, he playfully warned the old man to watch his mouth. Titus reminded him to address him properly. After all, he was still a commander. The two chuckled together. Clearly, they had a long history. As soon as they reached the gates where the meeting was about to start, they ran into a young man rushing out. The young man paid his respects to the two legends and escorted them into the inner sanctum. When the doors opened, the vibe changed completely. In the hall lit by the sunset, some of the most important figures in the land had gathered. At the end of the hall sat a woman on a magnificent throne. Commander Titus of the Abyssal Legion and Scholar Albertan were greeted with massive ceremony and respect. They walked straight toward the woman on the throne with straight backs and serious faces. The early arrivals had mixed reactions to their appearance. One person in particular, a total baddie, turned around and winked at them. Commander Titus looked at the cold-faced Albertan and sighed. They paid their proper respects to the powerful woman, and she gave the legionnaires a smile. Warmth along with permission to be at ease. She was delighted to see her nephew again after a long time. Albertan had buried himself in research for far too long to avoid the suffocating royal life. Commander Titus knew the queen called this meeting partly to drag that dorky scholar out of his cave for a glow-up. Once everyone was present, the queen officially opened the meeting. She had gathered representatives from several major cities of the kingdom. She intended to discuss dungeon activities and the course of action they must take from now on. To kick things off, the most qualified person to speak on the subject was none other than Commander Titus. He reiterated that mana concentrations in the dungeon were rising rapidly. According to his team's projections, the kingdom could face a monster wave breaching the first floor in just 3 or 4 days. Additionally, Legion guards had witnessed a monster ant appearing near the surface, a major red flag. Due to the unique nature of this creature and the dark omens surrounding its presence, tensions have escalated and anxiety is peaking. The Legion is deploying a plan to go deeper into the dungeon. They intend to find and wipe out the monster ant nest before it's too late. To carry out this large-scale op, Commander Titus formally requested military aid from the throne to beef up their numbers. They desperately need support to defend the city from the upcoming wave. They also need to free up Legion resources to go all in on that creature's nest. Commander Titus presented it clearly and concisely, but he was met with a deafening silence. After a brief hesitation, blatant snickering and disrespectful chatter mocking the old commander filled the room. Breaking that rude vibe, the total baddie who winked earlier stepped up to speak her mind. The queen wasn't laughing. She looked sharp as ever as she allowed Corrin to speak. With permission granted, Corrin declared that for over 100 years, the city of Lyria had thrived under the wise rule of Queen Verita and her ancestors. Every citizen of this city has enjoyed a rare peace, even in the millennia following the Great Cataclysm. In this era of peace, the responsibility for managing dungeon activities was fully entrusted to the Abyssal Legion. Even though dungeon crawling became a central economic pillar of Lyria, many view the Legion as overbearing and resource-hungry. As per usual, Commander Titus and his Legion are now begging for more aid to protect the city, proving they're too washed to fulfill their duties despite already hogging most of the budget. The queen was not feeling Corrin's blatant shade, so she told her to get straight to the point. Corrin represented the Mercenary Alliance, and once again, she petitioned the throne for her organization to have direct rights to manage dungeon access. She wanted to properly manage existing resources and promised to keep her people in check better than the Legion. She already had the backing of the Merchant Association, whose representative, a merman, shared that according to their estimates, setting dungeon mining regulations would double the kingdom's profits within 2 years. Queen Verita cut them off and rejected Corrin's request for the nth time. She was not amused by Corrin low-key downplaying the threat the ant represented. The queen suggested everyone in the room brush up on their history lessons. The land where their beloved city was founded once belonged to another prosperous kingdom. As the current ruler, the queen would not repeat the mistakes of those rulers by sleeping on the dungeon. She reminded everyone that the dungeon is not a resource or a mineral mine to be exploited. It is a threat and must always be treated as such. Maximum caution is a must. The Abyssal Legion liberated this land years ago. For that reason, the rulers of Lyria will continue to put their faith in them. Corrin argued that the future prosperity of the land and its people was more concerning than ancient history. She firmly believed the dungeon should be respected but never feared. Ignoring her ignorant arguments, Queen Verita happily agreed with Commander Titus's proposal. She entrusted the royal guard to the Legion commander for the duration of the wave. She wished to declare that Lyria would continue to place its faith in the Abyssal Legion in the face of the upcoming horror. When asked if he was confident in handling it, the wave and the ant nest, Titus assured the throne that the Abyssal Legion would absolutely get the job done. They've been doing this for over 3,000 years. Across the land of Pangera, underground, no one can match the power of his legion. That might have been true for 3,000 years, but they haven't met Anthony yet. Our boy is currently trying to finish the harvest by splitting the prey in two, seeing the prey's insides. Even so, he swallowed the disgust and started tonight's dinner. No matter how nasty the smell, look, and flavor were, he could barely choke down the centipede meat. This was probably the worst thing he'd ever put in his mouth. His brain was trying to tell him that starving to death might actually be better than enduring this for one more second. Luckily, voices from the past helped him keep it together. A pile of mangled centipede corpses can't be worse than starving, right? Finally, he managed to steel his stomach, ignoring the horrific taste and devouring it like a beast. He lost himself in the process until the system finally granted him the one biomass point he'd worked his tail off for. It seems regardless of size. After standing still for a while, the carapaces, claws, and legs began to glow brightly. He found it totally creepy. It seemed the leftover materials were being absorbed back into the ground. If that's the case. As for why, that's another question that needs answering. Ignoring her clueless arguments, Queen Verita happily agreed to Commander Titus's proposal. She entrusted the royal guard to the commander for the duration of the wave. She declared that Lyria would continue to trust the Abyssal Legion against the coming horror. When asked if he was confident in handling, setting aside the cave's mysteries, Anthony locked back into the most important task. He currently had 3 biomass points and 1 skill point to blow. With how rare these upgrades were, he treated this like a life or death board meeting decision. Regarding biomass, he had his sights set on upgrading his vision to level 3. He was desperately due for a software update. His policy and pre-combat threat assessment methods remained unchanged, so buffing his eyes was a total must. Without hesitating, he decided to pull the trigger and spend all his current biomass on the enhancement. He had braced himself, but nothing could truly prepare him for the god-tier pain that the vision upgrade delivered. Anthony thrashed wildly on the floor. The agony was way worse than last time. He thought the previous upgrade was bad, but this was straight up inhumane. If he had to describe the feeling, it was like a whole swarm of angry bees decided his eyeballs were the ultimate insult to their species. His eyes watered from an itch so intense, it was actually spectacular. After things settled down a bit, the skill point prompt popped up. Since he was already in the most pain of his life, anyway, he hit the agree button in his mind. Now that stealth had reached level 5, a new upgrade path opened up. It seemed level 5 skills could be evolved into an improved version for the cost of another skill point. He'd be a total clown not to pick the skill that had been his best lifesaver in so many situations. Upgrading stealth into advanced stealth improved his passive detection avoidance and massively buffed his effectiveness while standing still. Looking at his status board this time, he almost cried tears of joy. He'd come so far. He felt energized to conquer these caves and make every creature here bow down to his extraordinary power. Maybe at some point in the future, but for now, it's better to stay humble. Even with all the new upgrades, Anthony chose to stay ghost and continue his routine of scouting and covering the area bit by bit. In a 1v1 with the wrong opponent, he'd get washed before he could even react. Thankfully, advanced stealth gave him fresh confidence to explore the strange tunnels. He felt a bit more open to diving deeper into this place. Now he was more careful as he tracked the pheromone trails. His curiosity could finally be satisfied regarding what lay beneath. Without the new upgrades, he probably wouldn't have dared touch the pit he discovered a few days ago. This time he felt his adventurous blood pumping harder. He took a deep breath and steeled his resolve. Heading straight down without a light source still made him nervous, but it wasn't something he couldn't overcome. Anyway, this isn't something humans ever get a chance to do. He might as well flex the abilities an ant is capable of. With his eyes wide open, he crawled along the jagged cliffs of the pit. He thought he'd be moving in total darkness, which was true for the first part of the trip. But once he reached a certain depth, the place actually started to glow. In fact, that mysterious light got a bit brighter the deeper he went. He was beyond shocked to find actual plants thriving under these barren caves. The more he thought about it, the more it felt illogical. Sunlight doesn't reach here. Maybe these plants evolved to use magic veins to gather nutrients or something. Regardless, this was the first time he'd seen something beautiful in this middle-of-nowhere spot, while he was busy smelling the flowers. His antennae caught something that made them twitch. Just like before, he picked up a faint pheromone trail. And just like before, he got his hopes up that his clan, his tribe, his ant brothers were nearby. He felt pretty proud of himself for picking the right path, even though it was scary. In his head, he built a scenario where a powerful scout from his colony set out from somewhere under this pit to hunt down the thieves who dared attack the nest in the upper cave. Anthony really wanted some clout for his diligence and guts, surviving the harshness of the surface all on his own since hatching. While mindlessly heading toward the pheromone source, he hit another fork in the road. The tunnel ended abruptly, splitting into two paths. He refused to blindly charge into the nooks and crannies of the abyss. He was a bit traumatized by the spider encounter above. There could be mature spider monsters and other horrific things lurking down here. For now, he'd bet on the wider opening that looked less like a death trap, just in case he needed a tactical retreat. Passing through that path, he encountered something that made his jaw drop in awe. Before his eyes was an unbelievable landscape of glowing trees, grass, mushrooms, and all sorts of flora. He walked slowly through the bioluminescent forest under the shadow of glowing mushroom canopies. Radiant flowers swayed with every blade of grass. It was so insane that Anthony had to ask Gandalf what the hell was going on in this place. He never expected to run into such a rich ecosystem beneath this death trap. How could an underground space on such a massive scale even exist? He couldn't even see the other side of the field. By his estimate, the cave ceiling alone was about 60 meters high. Once the initial shock wore off, the fear of what might be lurking here started to kick in. If this place can sustain a thriving ecosystem, it must be crawling with monsters. An optimistic thought gripped his tiny ant heart. Somewhere in this massive cave, your colony might actually exist. Maybe you'll have to go further than ever to find it. Perhaps the scout you imagined passed through this area on the way to the upper caves. Regardless, exploring this space seems like the obvious move. Considering its scale, the thought is a bit daunting, though. The field is strange and interesting, but it's hard to enjoy its beauty when you're completely clueless about what's going on. In a space this vast, do the monsters turn into absolute units? How much biomass can they stack in a lush place like this? Pushing useless speculation out of his head, Anthony reminded himself to stay grounded and think positive. After this initial scouting trip, he set a goal to conquer this strange space and finally reunite with his swarm. But for now, he decided to retreat upward to grind levels. There are still a few species he hasn't sucked biomass from yet. He justified this move as the most logical one, trying to convince himself he wasn't being a coward. Before venturing into the mysterious glowing land, it's better to conquer known territory first. He vowed to level up and earn more mutations to prep for exploring that mysterious space. Fixing his mindset got him fired up. After leaving the pit, he headed back to the temporary nest he'd been crashing in for the past few days. Unlike before, he felt a bit of pressure because time was ticking. If his suspicions were right, the main tunnel definitely connects to the cave the human soldiers are occupying. Once they come down here and expand their perimeter, Anthony can kiss harvesting XP and biomass goodbye. He'd be forced to hunt only down in the pit without any intel. Weighing everything, he knew he had to move fast. He needed to be less cautious and make some big brain moves to speed up progress. Without more experience and biomass to upgrade, the journey down the pit could lead to a sudden game over. He activated his stealth skill and started hunting like time was running out. If he wanted to maximize gains, targeting creatures he'd never eaten was the play. This way, he could guarantee bonus points from Gandalf. Hunting a massive Kroga solo was out of the question. They're scarier than everything else in this place. They really are the apex predators. The most realistic targets were those slimy slugs. Anthony couldn't just sit there starving and studying their patterns, so he decided to send it. Spotted one, and he got a closer look. This thing didn't look appetizing at all. It was twice his body length, just a long, slimy torso with jagged spikes on its back. It left a thick trail of goo wherever it went. Its body probably secretes that nasty stuff to lubricate its path and boost its speed. Other than that, Anthony could only guess. Now was the time to give that thing a taste of a surprise acid shot from above. He fired a precise stream of acid right at the slug's tail. Total letdown. Nothing happened. It seemed immune to his chemical attack. It just slid along, completely unaware it was being hunted. Looks like the mucous membrane protecting its body makes acid useless. If he tried a physical approach with a bite, his mandibles might get stuck fast. Of all the defenses this thing could use, it picked that slime shield. It's the perfect counter to his skill set, and it's extremely gross. Still, Anthony had one more edge. He had the power and creativity of human intelligence. Actually, the trick he just thought of is something even earth ants do. It was the same trick he used against the spider webs. After grabbing a stone with his mandibles, he took aim. He crept up behind the slug, masking his presence. This was fairly easy considering how slow it moved. When he got close enough, he threw the stone with everything he had to see if the slimy jerk would react. As expected, no reaction. It's unclear if the slug even knew he was nearby. Anthony reactivated stealth and got to work. He picked up stones from everywhere and pelted the slug with all of them. This way, the dirt and rocks would pile up and soak up the slime. After stacking a decent pile of rocks to hinder its movement and dry out the mucus, he stopped to see if it would react this time. He positioned himself right above the slug. Thanks to his advanced stealth, his acid came out transparent like a teenage boy who just discovered incognito mode. The monster definitely felt that liquid burn as the sizzling of the melting membrane rang out. Anthony's plan worked. He looked a bit like a creep doing it, but it was effective and dealt significant damage. Hearing the sizzle and smelling the slug's burnt flesh made him want to gag. Just when he thought this would be an easy meal, the nasty jerk twisted around toward him. Now Anthony wondered how these slow slugs survived in this barren hell. In the upper caves, there are no trees to eat, which means they hunt too. On high alert and ready for anything, he bolted before the slug could spot him. As the acid burned through the slimy flesh bit by bit, the slug looked around frantically for its enemy, groaning in pain. When it finally detected a presence nearby, this seemingly gentle creature opened its mouth wide to reveal sharp fangs and let out a bloodthirsty roar. From that mouth, it launched a long-range attack aimed straight at Anthony. Luckily, he was safely shielded by the rock he chose as cover. Based on its properties, it looked like sticky acid. Seeing this acid melt rock in an instant, he knew it was way stronger than what he could fire from his butt. He was too distracted by the slug's impenetrable defense that he never thought it could use the slime to attack, like a deadly, acid-spitting nightmare. It's too late for tears now. Not that an ant could cry anyway. The only thing you could do is go all in and finish off this slimy jerk. The problem is your acid reserves are running low. Usually, you can fire about 3 or 4 shots at a time, but you haven't had a chance to time exactly how long it takes to recharge. If you keep spamming shots now, there's no telling when you'll be reloaded. You can't really take this slug in a melee fight with your mandibles. You get overwhelmed instantly. At the end of the day, acid is your only viable weapon. It has to land the finishing blow. Anthony feels like Gandalf ghosted him by forcing a fight with a creature born to hard counter his entire kit. If he hadn't been so thirsty for power, he wouldn't have risked this, right? Now, the safest play is to move from the ceiling down to the wall while keeping his location on lockdown. This cowardly move unexpectedly boosted his grip skill to level 4. Climbing walls and ceilings is what he does most, so it's surprising it only hit this level now. The slug has picked up his scent and is scaling the cliff. The scrap is imminent, and that damn protective mucus is starting to regen. Based on the facts, this monster seems to hunt by disabling and burning enemies with sticky acid before slowly sliding in for the kill. Anthony has the speed advantage, so he's going to test a tactic he just cooked up. First, he stands tall and proudly aims his butt right at the slug. The slimy monster is thirsty to catch some rounds from behind. Anthony dances and wiggles his big ant booty to bait the slug closer. Turns out, even a 2-meter-long slug monster doesn't know how to react to an ant twerking at it. Eventually, Mr. Slug loses his cool and opens his jaws wide again to fire another sticky acid shot. This is exactly what Anthony was aiming for. An open mouth is the perfect bullseye for his acid spray. The critical hit forced the slug to swallow the toxin whole, which boosted his acid shot skill to level 4. It was a perfect shot, one even Gandalf would approve of. Mr. Slug is foaming at the mouth, clearly in massive pain. It was a high-powered beam of death. The reaction was instant and violent. It lost its grip on the wall and hit the ground with a thud, snapping its spine. Flawless execution by the miracle ant. While the slug leaks all kinds of gross goo from its body, Anthony keeps his distance just in case he hasn't dealt fatal damage yet. He only relaxes when the system recognizes the W over the level 4 coral slug and grants the XP. With the slimy monster lying motionless, it looks like a 2-meter pile of crap. The hunt is over, but the harder part of the process is just starting. He has to eat the corpse to harvest the biomass. If an ant could barf, he'd be blowing chunks right about now. He scolds himself and tries to rationalize. The humans on Earth eat snails all the time. Biomass is biomass, no matter how you grind for it. At first glance, the mucus still coats the creature, but it stops secreting that gross lubricant with its last breath. To speed up the drying process, he digs up some dirt to soak up the slime. Taking a mouthful of dirt and dumping it on that nasty pile of goo isn't exactly an appetizing start to a meal. It feels like a punishment. But he has to endure for the sake of evolution and getting swole. Once he's dried out a decent part of the slug's body, Anthony takes the first bite. The texture alone would make the bravest foodies quit, and that slimy sauce doesn't help at all. Still, Anthony pushes through this time without much whining. He keeps changing bite locations to find the most edible part of the carcass. Only halfway through this forced food tour, and his stomach feels like it's about to burst. Thankfully, the system showed mercy and granted him the biomass from the coral slug. He can't finish the rest right now. But nutrients are hard to come by, so he'd rather bury it and save it for later. Time is limited, and he needs to pick up the pace. That approach naturally comes with risks. To minimize the risk of being too hasty, upgrading the acid gland and primary weapon to +2 sounds like a solid move. Mr. Slug was a big catch, but Anthony still has the energy to scour the tunnels for more opportunities. Not far from his hunting grounds, he spots an old friend, a spiny lizard. Seeing another one of these makes him feel a bit nostalgic for his first official hunt. The next prey is locked in. This time, he can reuse a few elements from his first plan for this attack. Using the wall terrain and acid to fight this creature is enough. Setting traps would take too much time. A head-on battle using acid and mandibles will be a great limit test to see where his current combat power stands. With his buffed antennae and vision, nothing escapes his radar. He easily spots the lizard nestled against a rock for a nap. Anthony took a spot right above it without being detected. He currently only has enough fuel for 1 or 2 acid sprays, so he needs to make every shot count. Since the clueless lizard is resting, he can sneak within 5 meters without alerting it, as long as he moves patiently. The last fight with Mr. Slug was too risky. This time he has the luxury to max out his win rate as much as possible. This poor spiny lizard has no idea what disaster is about to rain down on its head. Like an airstrike, Anthony dumps acid on the target's head, waking it up and leaving it writhing in agony. It's his most accurate shot yet, dead center, blinding the lizard. It immediately tries its best to shake off the acid by moving frantically. Anthony backs off to avoid getting poked or poisoned like a total scrub. His mandibles still aren't exactly god-tier weapons. As a worker ant, they were built for digging and gripping. They look scary up close, but they weren't made for piercing or slashing. The teeth inside each jaw are flat and can't rip through flesh. Some species like bulldog ants have long, sharp, deadly mandibles, or trap-jaw ants with a high-power lock muscle that coils like a spring before snapping shut like a mousetrap. Due to species traits, Anthony's bites felt more like clamping down rather than ripping through. He lacked that kind of potential. Each bite wouldn't deal much damage, but this was the perfect chance to see how many more upgrades he needed. Since he lacked quality, he could make up for it with quantity. Mounting the lizard like a racehorse, he unleashed a full-on barrage of bites to the back of its neck. The prey tried its best to buck him off, but his grip was too strong to be shaken. The more he bit, the more pain he inflicted, driving the lizard absolutely insane. After countless weak bites, the lizard finally kicked the bucket, and his bite skill reached level 4. His gamble paid off, and he was rewarded with a significant level up. Anthony felt extremely proud of himself for defeating a spiny lizard through pure grit and persistence on the floor. Commander Titus was stuck in his office, dealing with a mountain of paperwork for the countless arrangements before the great expedition. Peace was a total luxury lately. The Queen's move to support them by providing the Royal Guard was unexpected, but incredibly clutch. His legionnaires originally thought they'd get regular frontline grunts to fill the numbers. While still valuable, they were mid compared to the quality and discipline of the Royal Guard. The moment they hit the dungeon, everything flowed and preparations were floored. Things really started moving once the Queen's reputation got involved. Staring at his desk, Titus wondered if he could find more wood and stone like this when he went back to the dungeon. It had a great texture, mottled and dark. In his youth, he had carried a slab of wood on his back all the way to the surface just to make this desk. To this day, he hasn't found a more perfect material. Since he hand-built this furniture, Titus designed a secret switch to open a hidden compartment. Hidden inside that gap were vials containing glowing blue liquid. He sighed and rolled up his sleeves, revealing a strange tattoo. At first glance, it looked like a magic circle etched directly onto his skin. He grabbed a vial and poured the solution directly onto the center of the tattoo. As the blue liquid touched the ink, it glowed and fused together. Titus gritted his teeth, clearly in massive pain from that strange substance. After draining the vial, he remained at his desk while enduring the agonizing process. After a long, drawn-out period, the pain slowly faded away. He put the empty vial back in the secret compartment. He had already burned through half his stash. After carefully closing the compartment, the desk looked like a totally normal piece of furniture. Now that the buffing was done, it was time to head back where a Real Legionnaire belongs, the dungeon. He grabbed the mighty axe that had been hanging idle in his office for too long. It was time to sharpen this old tool. A good soldier always ensures his blade is prepped and ready for action. Deep in the dungeon, in what the Legionnaires call the Rookie Cave, soldiers were escorting bound prisoners inside. The level 35 Fire Mage and level 30 Archer Anthony had run into before were chatting. They didn't get why they had to bring prisoners down to this danger zone. However, one thing was for sure. None of them would make it back to the surface alive. All Archer Myron knew was that the initiation ceremony would happen somewhere deep in the dungeon. Veteran Legion members never spilled the tea on what happens during the initiation. The Abyssal Legion has a 3,000-year history, shrouded in mystery, and most people know very little about this private army that once saved civilization. It didn't matter. Myron would soon be an official Legion member. The Legion's secrets would be her secrets, and she was ready to protect them with her life. In this rookie cave, Myron and the Fire Mage Donnie Long were tasked with watching how the dungeon mercenaries hunted. Those clowns mostly just fumbled around danger zones and caught injuries. They never bothered to remember that dungeon monsters are a whole different breed compared to those on the surface. These big-headed mercenaries were just a nuisance to the Legion. They always pushed too far just to grind levels, never caring about the rescue teams that had to keep bailing them out. They always overestimated themselves and never learned their lesson. Suddenly, a Legion officer approached Myron and Donnie Long. She asked if they were ready for the expedition. Myron respectfully replied that their gear and armor had been checked and polished. But the officer wasn't talking about their stuff. She was asking if they were mentally prepped for what was coming. In this place, a commander or an officer like her only needs to make one mistake and it's game over. Donnie Long and Myron were slated for promotion once they headed down. It was a major occasion that every Legionnaire cherished, yet they could never let the hype cloud their judgment. In the next few hours, they would start clearing the upper area to set up a forward camp in the vast forest region. Back to Anthony's grind. A busy day of frantic hunting and filling his belly had passed. As expected, taking bigger risks brought bigger rewards. Circumstances forced him to be more aggro, and it definitely paid off. Anxious to check his progress and incredible loot, he pulled up his status board. After reluctantly eating the crunchy, spiny lizard and the remaining slimy coral slug meat, he had stacked 2 more biomass points. With a full stomach, he continued hunting and stumbled upon another lone coral slug to snack on. After picking a vantage point, he repeated the trick he used to handle the first one. The purple coral slug was not immune to his master tier taunting technique. The moment it opened its mouth to attack with sticky acid, Anthony sprayed his hot, sticky liquid at the monster. Firing inside the mouth guaranteed an instant critical hit. He just mistimed it a little bit, and also got hit by the acid mucus the monster spat out. Having that sticky goo on him was bad enough, but the burns shaved off 10 of his HP. Parts of his back carapace and thorax were slightly melted. After just recovering full health not long ago, he was pushed back to red alert. Even a partial burn took away 1/3 of his health. If it had covered more of his body, his life would have been on the line right then and there. He felt a massive urge to focus on upgrading his carapace to buff his paper-thin defense, but there were too many high-priority parts needing upgrades. After dragging out a war of attrition with high caution, he managed to kill the purple coral slug. Eating the slug helped recover a decent amount of health, bringing his health bar back to the green. After the gross meal, he felt like he had almost restored his image as a perfect ant. Looking at the upgrade menu, a few basic skills were on the priority list. However, he couldn't pass up the chance to improve his most effective weapon. Acid Shot can now be upgraded to Improved Acid Shot, a massive leap in quality that will improve accuracy and boost range. With the buffed range, he can land more reliable shots from a further distance. This was a total no-brainer. It significantly improved his safety as well as his consistent DPS. Hungry for more skill points, he hunted a lone wolf lizard and opened with his signature combo, Stealth plus Acid Shot. After that kill, a lot of his skills are nearing level 4. It'd be sick if he had enough points to max them all out if possible. Missing out on XP would be a tragedy. Now for the tricky part, managing his meager biomass. If possible, he wanted to keep pushing his vision to level 4. Vision superior to other monsters is the key factor for him to spot and pin down juicy lone prey. It also gives him peace of mind, not getting jumped from blind spots. The sensory advantage can never be lost, or he might fall into a deadly ambush by Kroga Beast or something worse. He'd have 1 biomass point left over for legs, carapace, or mandibles. All of them would help his overall kit. Putting a point in the legs would make him more mobile. It'd be useful for scouting, retreating, chasing, and fighting. Upgrading mandibles doesn't sound very tempting right now. It just takes too much biomass to see any real results. Currently, the two viable paths are +4 to eyes or +3 to acid gland along with +1 to legs. His cautious nature made him lean toward the defensive path. He'd be moving to a new environment soon. Holding every possible advantage is the key to survival. After careful consideration, Anthony finally bought the eye upgrade at the cost of 4 biomass points, just like before. His eyes were hit by unimaginable pain. He rolled around on the floor while trying his best not to claw his eyes out. They were actually growing and expanding inside his sockets. His carapace was shifting to make room for the new shape. Anthony prayed for Gandalf to make this torture stop. Mutations are cool and all, but the mutation process could only be designed by a cruel god. After what felt like forever, the burning pain finally faded. His visual power had a massive glow-up. His peripheral vision had expanded quite a bit. It's not perfect, but Anthony has come a long way from the clueless hatchling Reborn in Pangea not long ago. Soon, he might be able to reunite with his colony. He has a gut feeling about it. For now, the grind for the most efficient XP and biomass continues. That means hunting down new targets to snag their bonus biomass. Since he's fully rested now, maybe it's time to deal with one of those blade tail rats. However, isolating one of those rodents might be a struggle. On the way to the main tunnel, his antennae picked up faint vibrations from a disturbance up ahead. If it's another monster scrap, he'll have a chance to score some lucky points. With newfound optimism, he headed toward the commotion. The fight was intense and bloody. Though outnumbered, the wolves made up for it with pure ferocity. Neither side knew that an invisible young ant was lurking on the ceiling, waiting to drop some sticky liquid at the right time. First, he ghosted a bit further away to get a better angle. After all, this was the perfect time to flex his new skills. After a few minutes of back and forth, both sides split up to size each other up from a distance. Just one wrong move, and the conflict would definitely pop off again instantly. The rage on both sides was intense. But they were still playing it safe. It took Anthony stirring the pot a little by dropping a skill. The victim of the acid shot was the centipede pack. He has a massive beef with these creatures, so it made sense to light a fire under their butts. Almost instantly, the pack of hounds capitalized on the gap in the enemy formation created by a shot. One of them focused solely on the injured centipede, writhing in pain. It had been cut off from its pack support. The wolf didn't give a damn about the empty threats of the injured centipede, charging in like a rabid beast. In response, the centipede spat a stream of acid to try and throw the hound off balance. Neither side gave the other a second to breathe. The centipede tried to close the gap with a sneak attack, but it was completely shut down by the hound's spiked tail, observing from the best seat in the house. Anthony was stunned by the pure brutality of this fight. He imagined himself down there fighting those hounds. If he got clipped by that tail, he'd be flattened like a pancake. Facts. It was a scary thought, but the reality was even scarier. The injured centipede couldn't hold out much longer. Under the relentless assault of the hound, it was finally clawed to the ground, never to crawl again. The wolf looked smug as hell, as if it was thinking a bug shouldn't dare threaten the greatness of the hound race. But before it could use its tail for the finishing blow, a plot twist happened. Anthony dumped a heavy flow of acid onto the hound, melting its fur and scorching its flesh. He smirked mischievously while staying ghost thanks to his stealth. Cutting off the wolf's main character moment wasn't glorious, but he had to do what he had to do. Of course, a single acid shot wasn't enough to drop a unit as big and buff as the hound. The same was true for the centipedes. The war between the two powerful species had reached a turning point. With one centipede out of the picture, the match became pretty balanced. The insects seemed a bit hesitant after losing their lead. But the hound were hyped, pushing forward now that the momentum was shifting their way. To check the hound's ego, Anthony fired acid at the pack leader. His long-range weapon upgrade was on full display. The hit made the hound stumble to the ground, writhing and roaring in agony. Seeing the dog helpless, the centipedes moved in to seize the opportunity. They used their claws to snag and hold the dog tight, keeping it from moving and neutralizing its deadly fangs. The multi-legged monsters used their long bodies to constrict and crush their snarling enemy. No matter how much the hound struggled, the claws holding it still ripped through its flesh, and the stings kept pumping deadly venom throughout its body. While the window was still open, Anthony decided to hop off the ceiling and move to the outer edge. One of the hounds was being squeezed and poisoned to death, but the other dogs were nowhere to be seen. Not for a single second did this carnage stop. With all eyes on finishing the enemy, Anthony comfortably approached the half-dead centipede. After a few mandible snaps, this one would be toast. he flexed. The power of his level 4 mandibles, piercing the hide in one go and making blood spray everywhere. The finishing blow brought him more XP, and his hands were free to drag the prey away. The battle he directly influenced was reaching its climax. Those insects were focusing everything on killing the third hound. The remaining centipede was clearly going all out for survival, swinging its venomous spikes to ward off the other hounds. Even when weakened by poison, the power of a hound's spike tail is something you can never sleep on. It swiped the persistent insects away, slamming them into the cave wall, leaving them dazed and unable to move. Many of their legs and claws were crushed. Both sides were heavily damaged, with almost no fight left in them. Now they were just circling each other, waiting for an easy opening to exploit. As if an invisible starting gun went off, the two monsters lunged at each other, locking on and tangling with the enemy. Anthony watched quietly from the sidelines. This scene was like a straight-up kaiju battle. By the end of the fight, neither the centipede nor the hound had enough gas left to keep going. They collapsed on the floor at the same time. Both creatures slumped down, completely gassed and knocked out cold. Anthony strolled freely through the bloody battlefield. After the total war, all these creatures were on death's door and completely defenseless. That was terrible news for them, but it was like Christmas for our ant boy. He patted himself on the back for making stronger monsters dance in his grip. He was like a master conductor at a concert. All these helpless idiots with just a sliver of health were basically an unprecedented free XP and biomass farm. The Lupus Draco pups ranged from level 3 to 4, while the Claw kills were around level 2 to 3. Each kill gave Anthony different amounts of XP, but the total was more than any previous harvest. This made his XP bar rocket to the moon, hitting the level cap and unlocking the evolution menu. The system notification rang like sweet music in his ears. Anthony dropped to his knees and prayed to Gandalf. After landing the finishing blows, it was time to munch on some fresh meat. He only nibbled just enough from each corpse to suck up the juicy biomass. He heard something, a sound getting louder. He needed to eat like a glutton to max his gains. Somehow, he had a bad feeling that the sound was heading his way. Biting into the flesh of a Lupus Draco pup, a new creature not yet unlocked in his codex, gave him bonus biomass. When mature, they become the terrifying dragon wolves. Anthony wanted to linger for an hour, or even just 10 more minutes, but the thumping sound of marching footsteps was getting louder. He wanted to take some leftovers to go, but he had already consumed the meat of a whole dragon wolf, and his stomach was about to pop. Right then, he remembered reading something about ant research back in his homeworld. You see, some ant species have 2 stomachs. Scouts and workers don't always bring prey back to the nest. Sometimes they eat and fill what's called their social stomach. When they return to the nest, they regurgitate the food they gathered. Sounds a bit gross, but it's very practical. Some worker ants even become living storage units. They swell up to a ridiculous size just to feed the whole colony. If Anthony's personal stomach is already stuffed, maybe it's time to use the social stomach. Ignoring the thumping footsteps, he dived into round 2 of the feast to stack more biomass. The corpses and hounds were picked clean. Their meat and organs were crushed by his mandibles. Completely immersed in the feast, Anthony was snapped back to reality when he saw lights moving toward his position. He immediately bailed. All his gains would go down the drain if he got snatched by humans. All that meat in both stomachs was weighing him down, slowing his escape. Reaching the wall, he pushed his limbs to the limit, gripping and climbing despite the fact that scaling was clearly much harder now. He didn't dare look back out of fear, but he could hear the human soldiers tearing into the carcasses of those creatures. His nest was only 10 meters away. He'd definitely make it before getting caught. Humans started appearing right below his position. Their presence flushed many monsters out of hiding to resist the invasion. No matter how much the claw centipedes and dragon wolves ruled this ecosystem, they were no match for the coordinated human attacks. Magic blades and arrows were way stronger than uncontrolled savagery. Anthony stayed ghost and tried to drag his fat, but up that damn wall. The sound of chanting, arrows whistling in the wind, and swords swinging filled the cave. It was a one-sided slaughterfest. Luckily, Anthony reached his tunnel without being spotted. Since he couldn't go out through the main entrance, he had to use the dirt wall. He had prepped this exit before, but now his was too thick to fit through the small hole. His booty was too big to squeeze through. Anthony tried his best to pull out, but he was stuck tighter than a stepsis in a washing machine. After using all his might, he finally popped through the small hole and ended up face-planting. Now it's time to spend the biomass and drag his carcass down the pit. At the cost of 4 biomass, he upgraded his acid gland to +3 and his legs to +1. Just like the vision upgrade, buffing the acid gland felt like the worst case of explosive diarrhea with the way it burned his, but it felt terrible, but he couldn't stand still. He'd rather not fall to his death after reaching the pit. With the added weight, every step needed solid support. Hopefully, the one-level leg upgrade would give him enough strength to carry this extra load. The path down the dark pit was treacherous. He hit plenty of clutch or kick situations. His grip and upgraded legs were struggling to keep him glued to the cliff. Halfway down the hole, a massive explosion shook the entire dungeon, sending dirt and rocks falling into the pit. Those humans must have detonated a dirt wall nearby. That means they've passed his nest and are about to find his pit. With extreme urgency, Anthony threw caution to the wind and scurried straight down as fast as possible. Staying near the explosions would mean game over. Those humans would definitely rappel down, and he only had time for one critical mission. Luckily, he made it to the bottom without any major incidents. It was exhausting and stressful, but he did it. He opened the system and accessed the evolution menu. Along with the congrats, the system gave him a choice for the path he wanted to take. He could evolve into a mature worker ant, continue as a Formica species, or focus on condensing a monster core. Becoming a mature worker ant would buff stats and unlock new skills on a linear path. On the other hand, condensing a monster core would let him use MP and enhance custom evolution. Right now, going mature worker would give him the highest survival boost, but condensing the core opened the door to the world of magic, totally captivated by the second option. He didn't hesitate to pick the riskier path. Anthony passed out for an unknown amount of time. He slowly and painfully opened his eyes. The first thing he felt was a boiling ball of heat inside his chest. That was probably his newly formed monster core. He stood up weakly and slowly due to the evolution process. He couldn't stay here long. The troops were still up there. Those humans might be dropping people into the pit to investigate. Despite the struggle, he had to move. While fleeing, he opened his status window to see what had changed. His level had reset, and his stats were nerfed into the ground. He cursed Gandalf for resetting his progress back to level 1. All his hard work hunting and stacking XP had vanished into thin air. The ridiculous luck and the opportunities he created for himself were wiped clean. Surviving this long wasn't easy. The reset felt completely unfair. But as he calmed down and looked closer at the status window, he found a silver lining. The MP menu was unlocked, and it had gone from 0 to 10. His hunch was right. The monster core is the key ingredient for mastering magic for creatures like him. This explained why the monsters on the upper floor were so attracted to the magic-rich pool. They even treated it as a non-aggro neutral zone. By drinking that water, they could absorb mana and speed up their monster core formation. Even though he technically took a shortcut to create the monster core, his stats got nerfed into the ground just for 10 MP. He can't even use a stinger yet. To make matters worse, he's forced to navigate much deadlier territory from here on out. Those stats would have definitely come in clutch for his survival. He tried tapping into the MP to manipulate a few fallen leaves, but nothing happened. If he made the wrong call, he's going to be at a total loss. But the prospect of using magic and mana was just too tempting. He'll have to live with his choices. Maybe this path will allow him to go head-to-head with monsters he used to just run away from. Since he's considered unevolved again, it means he can farm levels and skill points way faster. He decided not to look at the skill menu, just in case mana shaping or chanting popped up. He planned to resist that temptation. For now, it's time to explore this vast and mysterious underground floor. At first glance, the cave ceiling looked to be about 60 to 70 meters high. Right now, he refused to climb something that high. One slip, and it's a guaranteed game over via gravity. Furthermore, his vision still isn't good enough to see the end of the walls, even at +4. As an insect, he doesn't have regular human eyes. He has compound eyes. That means his vision doesn't necessarily have a single focal point. Unlike humans, who can see one spot they're staring at in high detail, compound eyes can look in multiple directions at once, though the level of detail is lower. Recalling that fact, he felt vindicated in his choice to invest heavily in vision and mutate it to +5. Maybe Gandalf would give him a hint about what happens when mutations hit insane levels, but God doesn't seem very interested. Lately, his prayers have received nothing but crickets in response. It's as if the great Gandalf can only answer with a shrug. A little advice would be great, especially now that he's in a much weirder area. The landscape before him looked exactly like an alien planet, confirmation that he's truly in another world. Anthony's adventurous side kicked in. As he roamed freely across the meadow, he followed every little thing that caught his eye like a curious kid. When he came across a mushroom, he tried taking a nibble. He immediately spat it out. The simple act of putting it in his mouth dropped his HP. The big bite mark he left started oozing some kind of acidic sap. If he can take damage just from munching a mushroom, what else in this place could threaten his life? He made a mental note to never touch, let alone bite, random things in this area. Now he needs to move far away from the pit in case the troops raid the place. Once he's far enough, it'd be big brain to dig a hideout he can retreat to. He wondered if there were any other creatures down here. Anthony totally jinxed his own peace just by thinking about it. From the cave ceiling, bird monsters swooped down, flapping their wings and letting out sharp screeches. Their targets were the claw centipedes, chilling on the ground. Those jerks might have been big deals in the upper cave, but they're just another snack down here. Anthony watched the enemy he used to struggle against get snatched up like a free gummy worm. He hid under the mushroom canopies, admitting he might have been a bit too cocky. With his improved skills and condensed monster core, he thought he'd be top dog, that he could explore this alien place without fear. Clearly not the case. If a massive centipede gets snatched that easily, a tiny ant like him is near the bottom of the food chain. Apparently, evolved forms of the creatures he's familiar with reside in this area. It's just not fair. He has no colony to lean on for safety. If he had just accepted it and evolved into a mature worker ant, his body would have grown about 3 meters long and 2 feet thick. Regardless, he has to live with his choices. He knew damn well the creatures here would be stronger when he picked this thorny monster core path, relying solely on stealth and his buffed senses. He still has a decent chance of survival. Staying ghost, he observed the strange trees and mushrooms growing thick everywhere. Just like the flowers he first saw, these plants don't need sunlight to survive. They grew bizarre, succulent-looking leaves. Until he's 100% sure these plants aren't disguised ant traps, it's best to stay frosty and avoid touching those leaves. Suddenly, his aimless wandering was interrupted by a disturbance in the distance. This time, he refused to just hide under some mushrooms. It was time to gather intel. Like a leopard stalking its prey, he lowered his center of gravity as he moved through the forest. Combining both eyes and antennae, he pinpointed the exact location of the commotion. Moving around with advanced stealth constantly active helped him cross the experience threshold and level up, though it took an unusually long time. Having just reached this rank, advanced skills require much more usage before they can be upgraded again. Regardless, it came at the perfect moment. He had just found exactly what he was looking for. Up ahead was a Kroga beast, one that was heavily Elmer's glued together by luck. Luckily, this one hadn't evolved yet, and a massive wound was draining its energy. Seeing the beast at close range, Anthony felt pure terror. After all, that was the first monster he saw after reincarnating. Back then, it was casually snacking on a live ant like it was nothing. That was a haunting first impression. If ants could dream and have nightmares, this reptilian monster would definitely be the star of the show. Back to the main point. This Kroga had clearly just survived a brutal battle. As long as he played his cards right, this could be a god-tier opportunity. There were no other creatures around, and the Kroga was fading fast. It was time to push the fear aside and snag that bonus biomass he'd been forced to pass up before. Anthony bravely leaped out from the foliage. He spun his thick but in midair and took aim. Once locked on, he fired a massive amount of acid, intentionally targeting the open wound. It sounded a bit savage, but that was the weak spot he could exploit. The Kroga roared in agony as the wound was flooded with corrosives. Most of the acid soaked into the injury and scorched its internals. It was tilted that a tiny ant dared to take advantage of its weakness. It refused to back down. Anthony fired another round, spraying acid directly into its face. He forced the Kroga to swallow a huge gulp of acid, eroding its mouth, tongue, and throat. If these dumb monsters keep letting him fire acid into their mouths, this move might become his ultimate technique. Maybe he'd call it Anthony's mouth shot. The ant shuddered. He realized instantly that the name could be misunderstood in a very sus way. Anyway, the Kroga was now thrashing and snarling wildly, desperately trying to extinguish the pain. Today was clearly the Kroga's unluckiest day. It had just survived a death match only to get trolled by a tiny insect. Anthony thought 2 shots would be game over, but it was tankier than he expected. The Kroga lowered its limbs and began chasing him like a rabid beast. This desperate lunge was brutal. Anthony was completely gapped in terms of speed. When the Kroga got close enough, it swung its razor-sharp claws down. He struggled to hop aside to dodge the blow. If that hit landed, it would have been lights out for sure. Trying to keep a cool head, Anthony decided to go all in for one final showdown with his nemesis. Since his back was turned and his butt was at the perfect angle, he fired another acid shot. Unluckily, the Kroga was smart enough to predict his only damaging move and easily dodge the danger zone. The Kroga looked like a brute, but it was sharper than it appeared. It kept chasing Anthony, using every chance to strike with a murderous aura. Radiating from every pore, every claw swipe was dangerously close. Just one nick from those sharp things, and it's curtains. He couldn't just keep betting on a 50-50 coin flip to dodge left or right forever. The only way out was to go up. Instead of running, he turned around and charged straight at the reptile. The claw swipe came down, grazing one of his antennae and slicing it clean off. That hurt like hell, So much it made him want to gag, but he'd endured worse. Retreating was no longer an option. He had to go for broke. In a moment of ultimate desperation, he used his mandibles to bite down as hard as possible on the Kroga's left leg. This way, he could knock the monster off balance. Biting into the rock-hard scales sent his bite skill soaring to level 5, opening the path to upgrade to Crushing Bite for 1 skill point. He didn't waste a single second, mentally slamming the confirm button. Before the Kroga could pull back, he wanted to put everything into one final, decisive strike. Unlike the first bite that only scratched the scales, the second one let out a loud crack and sent the reptile's cold blood spraying. Anthony tried to hang on, but the Kroga's tail slapped him with a god-tier blow, sending him flying into a nearby rock. The impact was so violent it nearly knocked his soul right out of his body.